Don't you dare touch my car! David Harrington's voice exploded across the street as he shoved the homeless man backward with both hands. Security, get this filth away from me! The billionaire's face twisted with disgust as he looked at the disheveled black man who had dared approach his smoking $4.2 million hypercar. What David didn't know was that this filth had designed the very engine now dying before his eyes. And in the next 2 hours, this homeless man would not only save his car, but shatter everything David believed about success worth and the people he'd spent his life looking down upon. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments and subscribe to follow this incredible journey to the end. You won't believe what happens next. The shove sent Marcus Thompson stumbling backward, his worn shoes scraping against concrete. He caught himself before falling, his hands instinctively rising in a gesture of peace. I said get back. David Harrington stepped forward, his Italian leather shoes clicking sharply. What part of that don't you understand? Marcus remained calm. His voice carried the quiet authority of a man who had long ago learned that dignity couldn't be taken, only surrendered. Sir, I'm not trying to cause trouble. Your car is in danger. The quantum thrust cooling system has a microfracture in the secondary loop. If you don't address it within the next 47 minutes, you'll have catastrophic engine failure. David laughed. It was a cruel sound, sharp and dismissive. Listen to yourself. You think I'm going to believe some street person knows anything about proprietary technology that even the manufacturer's engineers struggle to understand? He pulled out his phone. I'm calling security. And if you're still here when they arrive, I'll have you arrested for harassment. Marcus didn't move. The smoke coming from your engine is blue-gray. That specific color means coolant is vaporizing against the thermal shielding. Your diagnostic system is probably showing you have less than 50 minutes. Am I wrong? David's thumb froze over the screen. He glanced at his car, then back at Marcus. For the first time, something other than contempt flickered in his eyes. How do you know what my diagnostic system says? Because I helped design it. David's laugh was louder this time, but it carried a nervous edge. Right. And I'm the President of the United States. He pressed the call button. Yes, this is David Harrington. I need security at my location immediately. There's a vagrant harassing me and possibly attempting to tamper with my vehicle. Marcus stood quietly as David described him to the security dispatcher. He'd heard these words before. Vagrant, suspicious individual, potential threat. After 3 years on the streets, the language of dismissal no longer wounded him. But it still exhausted him. They'll be here in 3 minutes, David said, ending the call with a satisfied smirk. I suggest you start walking. Mr. Harrington, I understand you have no reason to trust me, but I'm asking you to consider something. What if I'm telling the truth? What if I really can fix your car? Are you willing to risk your engine, your investor meeting, and everything you've worked for because you couldn't look past my appearance for 5 minutes? David's eyes narrowed. How do you know about my investor meeting? I don't. But a man in a $3,000 suit driving a $4 million car at 7 in the morning in this neighborhood is usually heading somewhere important. The tech campus is 2 miles east. You're dressed for a presentation, not a casual drive. Simple observation. The crowd around them had grown. A dozen people, now phones raised, recording the confrontation between the immaculately dressed billionaire and the homeless man in worn clothing. David noticed the phones and his jaw tightened. This was exactly the kind of publicity he didn't need. The optics of him arguing with a homeless man while his luxury car smoked behind him would be trending on social media within the hour. Fine, he said through gritted teeth. You have 60 seconds. Explain to me how you, a person clearly living on the streets, know anything about quantum thrust cooling systems. Marcus met his gaze steadily. My name is Marcus Thompson. 11 years ago, I graduated top of my class from MIT with 3 engineering degrees. I hold 11 patents in thermal regulation technology. 4 of those patents are currently licensed to the company that manufactured your car's engine. I was the lead thermal engineer at Space Tech Industries for 5 years. I consulted for Aerostar Industries, where I designed the prototype cooling system that your Zenith Aurora's engine is based on." David's expression shifted from contempt to confusion. "That's impossible." "I wish it were." A woman in the crowd gasped. She was holding her phone, scrolling rapidly. "Oh my God," she said loudly. "Marcus Thompson. I just searched the name. He's real. There are articles about him from 5 years ago. MIT's youngest engineering doctorate. He won the Hendricks Prize for Thermal Innovation." David turned sharply toward the woman. "What?" "It's all here. Patents, awards, everything. He was some kind of genius." She looked up from her phone, staring at Marcus with wide eyes. "What happened to you?" Marcus said nothing. A sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb. 2 security guards emerged, both large men with earpieces and the alert posture of professionals. "Mr. Harrington," the taller one said, approaching quickly. "We received your call. Is this man bothering you?" David hesitated. His eyes moved from the guards to Marcus, to the smoke still rising from his car. "He claims he can fix my car." The shorter guard snorted. "Sir, with all due respect, this vehicle contains technology that most certified mechanics can't even access. I think it's safe to say that—" "I know what internal memo AS447 says," Marcus interrupted calmly. "The document that details the exact vulnerability in the secondary cooling loop. The one that was flagged during prototype testing and ignored by management, because addressing it would have delayed production by 6 weeks. The color drained from David's face. "That memo is classified. How could you possibly—" "Because I wrote it." Silence fell over the group. Even the crowd had stopped their murmuring, sensing the shift in the confrontation's energy. The woman with the phone spoke again, her voice trembling slightly. "There's something else here. An article from 3 years ago. Marcus Thompson accused of sabotaging a prototype at Aerostar Industries. The project failed. Cost the company $40 million. She paused, reading further. But wait. 8 months later, he was completely exonerated. The investigation found that management had overridden safety protocols. He was innocent. "Then why is he homeless?" someone in the crowd asked. Marcus finally spoke. "Because exoneration doesn't undo destruction. By the time I was cleared, I had already lost everything. My apartment, my savings, my reputation. Try getting hired when every background check shows an 8-month investigation for corporate sabotage. Even after they cleared me, no one would return my calls." The taller security guard stepped closer to Marcus. "Sir, I'm going to need to see some identification." "All I have is my shelter ID." Marcus reached slowly into his pocket, conscious of how movements could be perceived. He produced a laminated card and handed it to the guard. The guard examined it, then spoke into his radio. "Control, can you run a background check on a Marcus Thompson current address listed as West Side Emergency Shelter?" She. While they waited, David paced beside his smoking car. Every few seconds he glanced at his watch, then at his phone, then at Marcus. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "I should just wait for the manufacturer's team." "How long did they say?" Marcus asked. 2 hours. Your diagnostic system is showing less than 40 minutes before permanent damage. The manufacturer's team won't arrive in time." David stopped pacing. "How do you know exactly what my diagnostic shows?" "Because the warning system was my design too. I calibrated it to give 45 minutes of warning before critical failure. If you're seeing that warning now, the fracture occurred sometime in the last hour. Probably when you hit that pothole on Market Street." David's eyes widened. "I didn't tell anyone about that pothole." "You didn't have to. That particular stretch of road has a depression that catches drivers off guard. The sudden impact would create exactly the kind of stress that causes microfractures in the secondary loop connection points. It's a design weakness I identified in my original report." An older man pushed through the crowd. He was dressed in an expensive overcoat, silver hair perfectly styled. His face was familiar to anyone who followed tech news. "David, what's going on here? I saw the crowd from my office window." David turned quickly. Richard, it's nothing. Just a car problem. Richard Morrison, CEO of Tech Horizon and one of the most powerful men in Silicon Valley, surveyed the scene with sharp eyes. His gaze landed on Marcus and stayed there. Do I know you? Richard asked slowly. You look familiar. Marcus met his stare without flinching. We've never met. But you rejected my job application 3 years ago. Your HR department said I wasn't a cultural fit. That was 2 weeks after I was exonerated of all charges at Aerostar. Richard's face reddened. I don't personally review every application. No, you don't, but your company does. And your policies ensure that people like me never get past the first screening. No permanent address. Rejected. Gap in employment history. Rejected. Previous investigation, even if cleared, rejected. Marcus's voice remained steady. Your system is designed to filter out anyone who's ever fallen down, regardless of why they fell or how qualified they might be. The crowd had grown to nearly 40 people now. Someone was live streaming. The tension was palpable. Richard turned to David. Who is this man? His name is Marcus Thompson, David said quietly. Apparently he designed the cooling system in my car. Richard's expression flickered. Marcus Thompson. The Marcus Thompson. The one who... He stopped himself. The one who... What? Marcus asked. The one who was falsely accused and then abandoned by an entire industry. Yes, that Marcus Thompson. The radio crackled. The taller guard listened, his expression shifting from professional skepticism to something more complicated. Mr. Harrington, the background check is interesting. Subject has no current employment records for the past 3 years. Previous employment includes Space Tech Industries as lead thermal engineer from 2012 to 2017, and Aerostar Industries as a consulting engineer from 2017 to 2019. Multiple patents registered under his name. There's also a note about an incident at Aerostar, but the details are sealed. Sealed because the company didn't want anyone to know it was their fault, Marcus added. David stared at Marcus. You actually worked at these companies? I did. Then what happened? How does someone go from lead engineer at Space Tech to... He gestured vaguely at Marcus's appearance. Marcus's expression remained composed, but something flickered in his eyes. Pain, perhaps. Or exhaustion. That's a long story, Mr. Harrington, and your car doesn't have time for the full version. Right now, all that matters is whether you'll let me help. The diagnostic system in the Zenith Aurora chimed loudly. Warning. 36 minutes to critical system failure. Mr. Harrington? The shorter guard stepped forward, lowering his voice. I recognize this man. He volunteers at the West Side Shelter. Teaches engineering classes to kids there. The shelter coordinator says he's legitimate. Some kind of genius, apparently. David looked at the guard with surprise. You know him? My cousin's kid takes his classes. Says he explains things better than any teacher he's ever had. The guard glanced at Marcus with something approaching respect. Look, I'm not saying I understand what's happening here, but if this guy says he can fix your car, it might be worth hearing him out. Richard Morrison stepped forward. David, you can't seriously be considering letting this man touch your vehicle. He could be planning to steal proprietary data. He could damage it further. For all we know, he caused this problem in the first place. Marcus turned to face Richard directly. If I wanted to damage this car, I would have done it 3 years ago when I first realized they used my designs without proper licensing. I would have filed lawsuits, contacted journalists, made your life difficult in 100 different ways. Instead, I taught children at a homeless shelter how to build circuits from discarded electronics. I spent my days in the public library, reading and learning, trying to keep my mind sharp. I did everything I could to maintain my dignity in a system that was designed to strip it away. He took a step closer to Richard. So no, Mr. Morrison, I didn't cause this problem. Your industry's corner cutting and your company's prejudice caused this problem. I'm simply offering to fix it." The crowd murmured. Several people were nodding. The live stream viewer count had climbed into the thousands. David's phone rang. He answered immediately. "Tell me you have good news." His expression fell as he listened. 2 hours minimum. That's not acceptable. The system is giving me 34 minutes. There has to be someone closer. Marcus watched the desperation bloom across David's face. He'd seen this expression before, not on billionaires, but on the men and women at the shelter when they realized no one was coming to help. That same terrible recognition that all the money and power in the world couldn't change certain realities. "Fine." David ended the call, his voice hollow. "The manufacturer says there's nothing they can do. They're recommending I have it towed to their facility, but towing will accelerate the damage." "Significantly," Marcus confirmed. "The vibration would stress the fracture point. You'd be looking at total engine replacement. That's 3 months of lead time. The components have to be custom fabricated. 11 weeks, actually. The quantum thrust bearings require a specialized alloy blend. Only 2 facilities worldwide can produce them, one in Germany, one in Japan. Current backlog is approximately 14 weeks. David lowered his phone slowly. "How do you know the exact production timeline?" "Because I helped calculate the original manufacturing specifications. The alloy composition was my design. Patent number AT5729QX. You can look it up." The woman who had been searching earlier spoke up again. "He's right. I found the patent. Marcus D. Thompson, listed as principal inventor, filed 5 years ago." Richard Morrison's face had gone pale. A young man pushed to the front of the crowd. He wore a press badge and carried a professional camera. "Kevin Walsh, TechBeat Daily. Mr. Harrington, are you confirming that a homeless man designed the engine in your $4 million car?" David's jaw tightened. "No comment." "What about you?" Mr. Morrison. Tech Horizon rejected this man's job application despite his qualifications. Care to explain your hiring practices? Richard took a step back. "This isn't the appropriate venue for..." "Sir, the venue is a public street where a billionaire just shoved a homeless engineering genius. I think the venue is perfectly appropriate." The crowd laughed nervously. The tension had shifted. What had started as a spectacle was becoming something else. Something with edges. Marcus raised a hand. "I'm not interested in making anyone look bad. I'm interested in fixing a car. Mr. Harrington, you now have approximately 32 minutes. I can repair the damage in 20 if you let me. The choice is yours." David looked at the reporter, at the crowd, at Richard Morrison's uncomfortable expression. Then he looked at his car, still smoking, still dying. "One call," he said suddenly. "I want to verify your identity first. You mentioned space tech. Do you know Dr. Patricia Chen?" A flicker of emotion crossed Marcus's face. "I do. She's their chief engineer now. I have her direct number." David was already scrolling through his contacts. "If she confirms who you say you are, I'll consider letting you proceed." "That's fair." David pressed the call button and raised the phone to his ear. "Patricia, it's David Harrington. I apologize for the unexpected call, but I have an unusual situation." He paused, listening. "Yes, that David Harrington. Look, I have someone here who claims to know you. Says his name is Marcus Thompson." Even from where he stood, Marcus could hear Patricia Chen's reaction through the phone. Her voice rose sharply, a cascade of questions tumbling out. David's expression transformed from skepticism to shock. "Yes, he's here. Right in front of me." He listened for another moment, then lowered the phone. "She wants to speak with you." Marcus accepted the phone. "Hello, Patricia." "Marcus Thompson, is that really you?" Patricia Chen's voice cracked with emotion. "Where have you been?" "We looked everywhere. I tried calling, emailing, everything. You just vanished." "I know. I'm sorry." "Sorry, Marcus, it's been 3 years. 3 years. Do you have any idea how worried everyone was? How worried I was?" Marcus closed his eyes briefly. I couldn't face anyone. After what happened, after what they accused me of, I couldn't. The accusations were false. The investigation proved it. You were completely exonerated. The investigation took 8 months, Patricia. By then, I'd already lost my apartment, my savings, my reputation. Do you know how hard it is to get hired when every background check shows an ongoing investigation for corporate sabotage? Even after they cleared me, the damage was done. No one wanted to touch me. The crowd had gone completely silent. Even the reporter had stopped taking photos, caught up in the raw emotion of the moment. Marcus, I sent you a job offer, a standing offer. You never responded. I never received it. I didn't have a permanent address. I didn't have a phone. By the time you sent that offer, I was already living in my car. 2 months later, I lost that too. How did it get that bad? Marcus's voice dropped, but in the silence, everyone could hear. Depression hit first. Then the money ran out. Then the car got repossessed. Then the shelters were full, so I slept in doorways. Then winter came. He paused. You don't understand how fast it happens, Patricia. One day you're an engineer with patents and a future. The next day, you're invisible. People walk past you like you don't exist. Companies that used your work won't even let you through the front door. On the other end of the line, Patricia Chen made a sound that might have been a sob. Marcus, where are you now? Tell me exactly where you are. I'm in San Francisco, standing next to a broken-down Zenith Aurora that I can fix if its owner will let me. Wait, you're with David Harrington. He just called me. I am. Put me on speaker, right now. Marcus pressed the speaker button and held the phone between himself and David. David. Patricia's voice was sharp, commanding. Listen to me very carefully. The man standing in front of you is not some random homeless person. He is Dr. Marcus Thompson, one of the most brilliant engineers I have ever worked with. His designs are still the foundation of our most advanced thermal systems. We use his patents in satellites that are orbiting Earth right now. If he says he can fix your car, then he can fix your car. If he said he could fix the space shuttle with dental floss and chewing gum, I would believe him. David looked at Marcus with entirely new eyes. Dr. Chen, he appears to be homeless. He's been living on the streets for years. I don't care if he's been living on the moon. Marcus Thompson knows more about thermal regulation systems than anyone else on this planet. Whatever happened to put him in this situation is a tragedy and a failure of everyone who should have supported him, including me. Her voice softened. Marcus, when this is over, you're calling me back. That's not a request. We have positions waiting for you. We always have. I appreciate that, Patricia. I mean it. Promise me. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I promise. Good. Her voice hardened again. David, let him fix your car. And whatever else happens, treat him with the respect he deserves. You understand me? I understand. And Richard Morrison, I know you're there. I can hear you breathing. Richard startled. Patricia, Save it. We'll be having a conversation later about your company's hiring practices and why a genius like Marcus Thompson was rejected while mediocre candidates with the right addresses and the right backgrounds sail through your process. But that's for later. Right now, let Marcus work. The call ended, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. David stared at the phone in Marcus's hand, then at Marcus himself. I owe you an apology. You owe me the chance to fix your car. We can discuss apologies later. David nodded slowly. What do you need? Your emergency kit. And someone needs to get those pencils. Staedtler Mars Lumograph 8B grade. That convenience store should have them. David turned to the shorter security guard. Go, run if you have to. The guard took off at a sprint. Marcus moved toward the Zenith Aurora, the crowd parting before him like water. He approached the vehicle with the reverence of an artist returning to a masterpiece. May I open the hood? David reached into the car and pressed a button. The hood rose with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a labyrinth of technology that made several onlookers gasp. The reporter Kevin Walsh moved closer with his camera. "Do you mind if I document this?" Marcus glanced at him. "As long as you don't get in the way." "You're about to fix a $4 million car with pencils and emergency supplies. This is the most interesting thing I've covered all year." Marcus allowed himself a small smile. "Then watch carefully. You might learn something." He leaned over the engine, his eyes scanning the components with practiced precision. "There." He pointed to a nearly invisible seam. "That's where the fracture is developing. You can see the residue pattern from the leaking coolant." David leaned in beside him. "I don't see anything." "You wouldn't unless you knew what to look for. The coolant is clear, but it leaves a crystalline trace when it evaporates. See that faint shimmer along the connection point?" David squinted. "Maybe. Trust me, it's there." The diagnostic system chimed again. Warning: 28 minutes to critical system failure. The security guard returned, breathing hard, clutching a package of pencils. "Got them. Last box they had." Marcus accepted the pencils and examined them carefully. "Perfect." He opened David's emergency kit and began organizing the contents. His movements were precise, economical, betraying decades of professional experience. The transformation was remarkable. The man who had been dismissed as a vagrant minutes ago now radiated competence and authority. Richard Morrison watched from the edge of the crowd, his expression unreadable. The reporter noticed and moved closer to him. "Mr. Morrison, any thoughts on what we're witnessing?" Richard's jaw tightened. "No comment." "Your company rejected this man's application. He's clearly qualified. How do you explain that?" "I said no comment." "The public might interpret that as, I don't care how the public interprets anything. Now if you'll excuse me." Richard turned and walked away, pushing through the crowd with more force than necessary. Several people booed softly as he passed. Marcus didn't look up from his work. He was extracting the graphite core from one of the pencils with surgical precision. "I'm going to explain what I'm doing as I work," he said. "Not because I need to, but because I want you to understand." David nodded, unable to look away. "The emergency sealant in your kit is designed for temporary repairs to the primary cooling system. By itself, it can't withstand the pressure and temperature of the secondary loop. But when you infuse it with graphite nanoparticles of this specific density, the molecular structure changes. It becomes capable of bonding with the specialized alloy in the secondary loop connection." He began crushing the graphite into a fine powder. "The key is the particle size. Too large and they won't integrate properly. Too small and they'll pass through the sealant matrix without creating bonds. 8B grade pencils have the ideal density for this application." "How did you figure this out?" David asked, genuinely curious now. "I didn't. Not intentionally. 2 years ago, I was at the library working through thermal regulation problems to keep my mind sharp. I spilled coffee on my notes and grabbed the nearest thing to blot it. Turned out to be a technical paper on graphite nanostructures. I started reading, and I realized the potential applications." Marcus mixed the graphite powder with the sealant, creating a dark metallic compound. "I've been refining the formula ever since, using the library computers to run simulations, testing small applications whenever I could." He looked up briefly. "Having nothing but time turns out to be useful for research." A woman in the crowd spoke up. "You develop new technology while living on the streets. I developed 3 new patents while living on the streets. They're documented in notebooks I keep at the shelter. Drawings, calculations, experimental results, all done with borrowed pencils and discarded paper." The crowd murmured in disbelief. Kevin Walsh was recording everything. "Sir, are you saying you have patentable innovations that you created while homeless?" "I'm saying I never stopped being an engineer. My circumstances changed. My mind didn't." He turned back to the car. "The fracture should be visible once I remove this access panel." His fingers moved with confidence over the engine components, locating and releasing tiny catches that the untrained eye couldn't even see. "Mr. Harrington, may I use your phone's flashlight?" David complied immediately, holding his phone steady as Marcus directed. The access panel came free with a soft click. A faint hissing sound became audible. "There it is." Marcus pointed to a hairline crack nearly invisible. "The microfracture, exactly where I predicted. That tiny line is causing all this. The secondary cooling loop operates at extreme pressure. Even a crack this small allows coolant to escape into the tertiary chamber. That's what causes the blue-gray smoke. The coolant vaporizes on contact with the thermal shielding." The diagnostic chimed. "Warning. 22 minutes to critical system failure." Marcus began the delicate process of preparing the fractured area for repair. "I need to vent the contaminated coolant first. Mr. Harrington, do you have a container in your trunk? Something that can hold about a quart of liquid?" David produced a collapsible silicone container from his emergency kit. "Will this work?" "Perfectly." Marcus positioned the container beneath the access port and released a small valve. A thin stream of iridescent fluid began to flow. "Is that the nano coolant?" David asked. "Yes, approximately $20,000 worth. We're saving about 60%, which is better than I expected." David made a small choking sound. $20,000 for coolant. The quantum stabilization process is expensive. The coolant contains suspended nanoparticles that prevent resonance disruption in the thrust bearings. Without it, the bearings would tear themselves apart within seconds of operation. The stream slowed to a drip, then stopped. Marcus sealed the valve. Now for the repair itself. He picked up the graphite-infused sealant compound, rolling it between his fingers to test the consistency. "This next part requires complete concentration. The application must be precise, and I'll only have one chance. If the compound touches any component other than the fracture site, it could cause additional problems." David stepped back, gesturing for everyone else to do the same. The crowd fell silent. Nearly 60 people now held their breath as the homeless man bent over the multi-million-dollar vehicle, his hands steady as a surgeon's. Time seemed to slow. Marcus worked with absolute focus, applying the compound to the fracture with movements so precise they seemed almost mechanical. His breathing was controlled, rhythmic. His fingers didn't tremble. 1 minute passed. 2. The diagnostic system chimed. Warning. 18 minutes to critical system failure. Marcus didn't look up. His entire world had narrowed to the tiny crack beneath his fingers and the compound that would seal it. 3 minutes. He set down the applicator and examined his work using David's phone light to illuminate every angle. "The seal is complete. Now I need to restore system pressure." He reached deeper into the engine compartment, manipulating components that were designed to be accessed only by specialized equipment. "What are you doing now?" David asked. "Bypassing the automatic refill system. In a shop, this would be done with computerized equipment that meters the coolant precisely. But we don't have time for precision. We need functional." "Is that safe?" "Safe enough. The system has redundant pressure regulation. Even if I overfill slightly, the excess will be vented through the tertiary release valve." Marcus opened a secondary reservoir in the emergency kit and began refilling the cooling system. "This is standard coolant, not the specialized nano formula. It won't provide optimal performance, but it will prevent catastrophic failure until you can get proper service. You'll need to keep engine output below 70%. The diagnostic chimed. Warning. 12 minutes to critical system failure. "How much longer?" David asked. "Almost done." A voice called out from the back of the crowd. Marcus Thompson." Marcus's hands froze for just a moment. Then he continued working, not looking up. A man pushed through the crowd. He was in his 50s, wearing an expensive suit, his face pale with shock. "My God, it is you! I thought you were dead!" Marcus still didn't look up. "Hello, James." David looked between them. "You know each other?" The man named James ran a hand over his face. "I was his supervisor at Aerostar. I was the one who—" His voice broke. "Marcus, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. They told me the evidence was clear, They said you had deliberately sabotaged the prototype. I believed them. Marcus made another careful adjustment to the cooling system. You believed what was convenient to believe James. It was easier to blame the black engineer than to admit your own management team had cut corners. I know. I know that now. The investigation, when it finally concluded, I saw the real evidence. I saw what they did, how they falsified reports, how they used you as a scapegoat. James's voice was shaking. I tried to find you, to apologize, but you were gone. No one knew where you went. I didn't go anywhere. Marcus's voice was flat. I was right here, in this city, on these streets, invisible, just like every other person you walk past without seeing. James looked like he might be sick. If there's anything I can do, you can step back and let me finish this repair. We have less than 10 minutes. James retreated into the crowd, his face ashen. David watched the exchange with growing understanding. He was part of what happened to you. He was a small part of a large system. The system is the problem. Individual people are just its instruments. Marcus made several final adjustments, his movements quick but precise. Then he stepped back from the engine. That's it. The repair is complete. David stared at him. That's it. You're done. There's only one way to know for sure. Start the engine. David hesitated, his hand hovering over the ignition button. If the repair didn't work, then we're no worse off than we were 20 minutes ago, but it worked. Start the engine. David took a breath and pressed the button. Nothing happened. 1 second passed. 2, 3. David's face fell. Then the Zenith Aurora's engine came to life. The sound was unlike any conventional vehicle. A high-pitched whine modulated to a deep, powerful purr. The smoke that had been billowing from the engine compartment stopped completely. The diagnostic screen flickered, processing new data. System stabilizing. Quantum thrust cooling functional. Performance limited to 70% capacity. Service recommended. A cheer erupted from the crowd. Spontaneous applause broke out. Several people were recording the moment, their phones capturing the impossible triumph of a homeless man and a billionaire's broken car. Kevin Walsh was grinning broadly. I've been covering tech stories for 15 years. This is the best one I've ever seen. David stared at the diagnostic readout, his mouth open. That's impossible. The manufacturer said this couldn't be repaired in the field. The manufacturer has a financial incentive to make repairs complicated, keeps customers dependent on their service network. Marcus wiped his hands on a cloth from the emergency kit. The actual repair isn't difficult if you understand the fundamental principles of the system. David turned to face Marcus. How long will this hold? The graphite-infused sealant should maintain integrity for approximately 3 weeks under normal operating conditions. More than enough time to schedule proper service. Just remember to keep output below 70%. For a long moment, David simply looked at Marcus. Really looked at him, perhaps for the first time. I pushed you, he said quietly. When you first approached me, I shoved you and called security. I treated you like you were nothing. You treated me the way most people do. It's not personal. It should be personal. It should matter. David's voice was rough. You just saved my car. You might have saved my company. And I almost had you arrested for offering to help. Marcus was quiet. Why did you help me? David asked. After how I treated you, why didn't you just walk away? Because your car was broken and I knew how to fix it. It's that simple. No. David shook his head. It's not that simple. Not after everything you've been through. Not after 3 years on the streets. You had every reason to let my car die just to prove a point. Marcus considered the question carefully. Mr. Harrington, I've spent 3 years being invisible. 3 years watching people look right through me as if I don't exist. 3 years knowing that I have skills that could help, knowledge that could make a difference, but never getting the chance to use them because no one would give me that chance. He paused. Today, you gave me that chance. Even if it took a phone call from Patricia to convince you, even if it took your car dying in public with cameras everywhere, you eventually gave me the opportunity to show what I could do. Do you have any idea how rare that is? David had no response. So yes, I could have walked away. I could have let you learn a lesson about judging people by their appearance. But that would have only confirmed what you already believed about people like me. The only way to change how you see us is to show you who we really are. The crowd was beginning to thin, people returning to their daily lives with an extraordinary story to tell. Kevin Walsh was still recording, capturing every word. David extended his hand. Thank you. For the repair and for the lesson. Marcus shook it firmly. You're welcome. I'd like to give you a ride to wherever you need to go, and proper compensation for your work. That's not necessary. It's absolutely necessary, and frankly, after what Dr. Chen said about you, I have about 1,000 questions I'd like to ask. Would you consider joining me for the rest of the morning? I have an investor meeting in a couple of hours. Your insights would be invaluable. Marcus glanced down at his worn clothes. I'm hardly dressed for an investor meeting. David smiled for the first time. That can be fixed. James, who had been lingering at the edge of the crowd, stepped forward hesitantly. Marcus, before you go, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you 3 years ago. Marcus turned to face his former supervisor. What is it, James? James took a shaky breath. The investigation didn't just prove you were innocent. It proved that the order to override the safety protocols came from the top. From the CEO himself. He knew the risks. He made the call anyway. And when the prototype failed, he needed someone to blame. Marcus's expression didn't change. I already knew that. But that's not all. James pulled out his phone, hands trembling. Last year I found documents, hidden files that were supposed to be deleted. They show that the company didn't just blame you for the failure. They actively worked to destroy your reputation afterward. Blacklisted you with every major firm in the industry. Made sure no one would hire you. The crowd had gone still again. David's face hardened. They deliberately kept him unemployed. It was systematic, coordinated. They wanted to make sure he could never come back to challenge their narrative. James looked at Marcus with tears in his eyes. I have copies of everything. Emails, memos, directives. Enough to prove what they did to you. Marcus stood very still. Why are you telling me this now, James? Because I was a coward 3 years ago. I saw what was happening and I said nothing. I let them destroy you to save myself. His voice cracked. I can't undo what happened. But maybe I can help you fight back. The silence stretched. Then Marcus nodded slowly. Send the documents to Patricia Chen. She'll know what to do with them. James nodded rapidly, already typing on his phone. David watched the exchange with a new understanding dawning on his face. This wasn't just bad luck, was it? You didn't just fall through the cracks, you were pushed. Marcus turned to him. Yes, Mr. Harrington, I was pushed. And now, perhaps, I have the chance to push back. The drive to Armani on Union Square took 12 minutes. 12 minutes of silence that felt like hours. Marcus sat in the passenger seat of David's SUV, watching the city pass by through tinted windows. These were streets he knew intimately, but from a different perspective. He had walked them countless times, invisible, ignored, stepped around like an obstacle. Now he was gliding through in a vehicle that cost more than most people earned in a decade. David kept glancing at him, questions burning behind his eyes, but he said nothing. The weight of what he had witnessed, what he had learned, seemed to have stolen his words. Finally, Marcus spoke. You're wondering how to talk to me now. David startled slightly. What? An hour ago I was a threat to be removed. Now I'm a genius who saved your car and possibly your company. You don't know which version of me to address. David was quiet for a moment. I'm wondering how I could have been so wrong about someone in the span of 60 seconds. You weren't wrong. You were conditioned. There's a difference. Is there? Marcus turned to look at him directly. You saw a homeless black man approaching your expensive car, and every instinct you've developed over a lifetime told you I was a threat. Those instincts weren't born in you. They were taught. By media, by culture, by 1,000 small messages about who belongs and who doesn't. David's grip tightened on the steering wheel. That doesn't excuse what I did. No, it doesn't. But understanding it is the first step toward changing it. They arrived at the Armani store at 8:47 a.m. The manager was waiting at the door, alerted by David's security team. His expression flickered briefly when he saw Marcus, a micro-movement of surprise quickly suppressed. Mr. Harrington, we've prepared a selection based on your specifications. Thank you, Giorgio. This is Dr. Marcus Thompson. He'll need everything: suit, shirt, shoes, accessories. The best you have in his size. Giorgio's professional mask didn't slip, but his eyes reassessed Marcus with new interest. Of course. Dr. Thompson, if you'll follow me. Marcus hesitated at the threshold. Mr. Harrington, this really isn't necessary. I can wait in the car while you attend your meeting. No. David's voice was firm. You're coming to this meeting, and you're going to show those investors exactly what real innovation looks like. I haven't agreed to anything yet. I know. But you will, because you didn't spend 3 years keeping your mind sharp just to walk away from the first real opportunity you've had. Marcus studied David's face for a long moment. Then he nodded and followed Giorgio inside. The next 30 minutes were surreal. Marcus stood on a fitting platform while tailors measured and adjusted their hands, professional and impersonal. He caught glimpses of himself in the mirrors surrounding him, watching his transformation with detached fascination. The charcoal suit they selected cost more than he had earned in his last year of employment. The shoes were Italian leather, hand-stitched. The watch David insisted on lending him was worth more than the car Marcus had lost 3 years ago. You clean up well. David's voice came from behind him. Marcus turned to see his reflection in the mirror, and for a moment he didn't recognize himself. The man staring back at him looked like the engineer he had once been. Polished, professional, powerful, but the eyes were different now. They held something the old Marcus had never possessed. A depth born of suffering, a clarity that came from losing everything and surviving. Clothes don't change who I am, Marcus said quietly. No, but they change how others see you. And sometimes that's enough to get your foot in the door. Marcus adjusted his cuffs, a gesture that felt both familiar and foreign. The door shouldn't require this costume for entry. You're right, it shouldn't. But we fight the battles we can win, and we change the rules when we're able. David moved to stand beside him. Today we win the battle. Tomorrow we start changing the rules. They left the store at 9:23 a.m. The investor meeting was scheduled for 10:30. In the car, David's phone buzzed continuously. He glanced at the screen and his expression shifted. The story is spreading. What story? You, the car. Everything that happened this morning. David turned the phone so Marcus could see. Kevin Walsh posted his article 20 minutes ago. It's already been shared 40,000 times. Marcus took the phone and read the headline. Homeless genius saves billionaire's 4-year car with pencils. The Marcus Thompson story. Below it was a photo of Marcus bent over the engine of the Zenith Aurora, his worn clothes contrasting sharply with the gleaming technology before him. The caption read, Sometimes the most brilliant minds are hiding in plain sight. Marcus scrolled through the article. Walsh had done his research quickly. The piece included details about Marcus's patents, his work at Spacetech, the false accusations at Aerostar, and the phone call with Patricia Chen. It painted a picture of a man failed by the very industry he had helped build. The comments section was exploding. This is going viral, David said. By noon, every tech publication in the country will be running their own version. Marcus handed back the phone. I didn't ask for publicity. No, but you've got it now. The question is what you do with it. Before Marcus could respond, David's phone rang. The caller ID showed a name that made David's eyebrows rise. It's the CEO of Meridian Technologies, third largest tech company on the West Coast. He answered. Robert, what can I do for you? Marcus couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but he watched David's expression shift from surprise to amusement to something approaching satisfaction. Yes, he's with me right now. No, I don't think he's looking for employment at the moment. Yes, I understand you have positions available. I'll let him know. He ended the call, and immediately the phone rang again. Jennifer Park, CTO of Nova Systems. Another call. Another offer. By the time they reached Vertex Technologies headquarters at 10:15, David had fielded 7 calls from executives at major tech companies, all inquiring about Marcus Thompson. Word travels fast in this industry, David said as they stepped out of the car. Everyone wants to be the one who discovered the comeback story of the decade. Is that what this is? A comeback story? David stopped walking and turned to face Marcus. That depends entirely on you. You can let this moment pass, return to the shelter tonight, and be forgotten by next week. Or you can walk into that building with me and start writing the next chapter yourself. Marcus looked up at the gleaming tower of Vertex Technologies. Through the glass walls, he could see people moving, working, building the future. A future he had once been part of. I'm not interested in being anyone's inspirational poster, he said. Good, because I'm not interested in hanging you on my wall. I'm interested in putting you in my boardroom. David started walking again. Those investors in there are about to fund a thermal regulation system for quantum computing. A system that frankly has some serious flaws. Flaws I didn't see until you identified 3 of them in 20 minutes while also saving my car. You want me to consult on your project? I want you to lead it, but we can start with consulting and see where it goes. They entered the building at 10:19 a.m. The lobby was sleek and modern, all glass and steel, and carefully curated art. Employees moved with purpose, their badges swinging, their faces focused. A few glanced at David and nodded respectfully. None of them looked twice at Marcus. The elevator ride to the 47th floor was silent. When the doors opened, a woman was waiting. She was in her 50s, elegant and sharp-eyed with silver streaks in her dark hair. David, the investors are assembled. They're eager to begin. Her gaze shifted to Marcus. And this must be Dr. Thompson. Patricia Chen called me personally to explain the situation. Dr. Thompson, this is Dr. Sarah Mitchell, our Chief Technology Officer. Sarah extended her hand. Dr. Thompson, I've studied your work for years. Your paper on quantum thermal regulation is required reading for our engineering teams. I never imagined I'd meet you like this. Marcus shook her hand. Neither did I. Patricia told me what happened to you, what was done to you. Sarah's expression hardened. The industry failed you. I hope we can begin to make that right. That depends on whether the industry is willing to change or just willing to make exceptions for the cases that become too public to ignore. Sarah held his gaze. That's a fair question, and I don't have a good answer. But I do know that having you in that room today will matter. Not just for you, but for everyone watching to see what happens next. They walked together toward the conference room at 10:27 a.m. Through the glass walls, Marcus could see a dozen people seated around a long table. Men and women in expensive suits, tablets and laptops before them, the comfortable posture of people accustomed to power. David paused outside the door. Are you ready? Marcus looked at the faces inside. These were the gatekeepers, the decision-makers, the people who determined which ideas received funding and which withered in obscurity. People like them had once welcomed him as a colleague. Then they had abandoned him without a second thought. I've been ready for 3 years, Marcus said. I was just waiting for someone to open the door. David smiled. Then let's open it. They entered at 10:29 a.m. Conversation stopped, heads turned. 12 pairs of eyes assessed the newcomer in the impeccable suit who walked in beside David Harrington. "Ladies and gentlemen," David began, his voice carrying the easy confidence of a man on his home turf. "Before we begin our formal presentation, I need to tell you about something extraordinary that happened to me this morning." He recounted the story, the breakdown, the homeless man's approach, the dismissal, the gradual revelation of who Marcus truly was, the repair that shouldn't have been possible. As he spoke, Marcus watched the investors' faces. He saw skepticism give way to curiosity, then to something approaching wonder. "The man who saved my car this morning is standing beside me now," David concluded. "Dr. Marcus Thompson, holder of 11 patents in thermal regulation technology, former lead engineer at Space Tech Industries, and in my opinion, one of the most brilliant minds in our field. I've invited him to observe our presentation today, and with your permission, I'd like him to offer his insights on our thermal regulation project." A murmur ran through the room. A silver-haired man at the head of the table spoke first. "David, this is highly irregular. We scheduled this meeting to evaluate a specific proposal. Bringing in an outside consultant without prior arrangement." "With respect, William," David interrupted, "Dr. Thompson isn't just any consultant. 4 of the patents that make our current prototype possible were designed by him. He knows this technology better than anyone in this building, including our own engineering team." William's eyes narrowed. "If he's so brilliant, why is he homeless?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Marcus stepped forward. "May I answer that?" William gestured impatiently. "Please." "I'm homeless because 3 years ago, I was falsely accused of sabotaging a prototype at Aerostar Industries. The accusation was eventually proven false, but by then, I had lost my apartment, my savings, and my professional reputation. When I tried to find new employment, I discovered that I had been systematically blacklisted by my former employer. Every application I submitted was rejected. Every contact I reached out to stopped returning my calls." He paused, letting the words settle. "I'm homeless because the industry I helped build decided I was disposable. Because when it came time to choose between admitting their own failures and destroying an innocent man's career, they chose destruction. Because systems designed to identify talent are also very efficient at filtering out anyone who doesn't fit a predetermined mold." The room was silent. Marcus continued. "But you asked why I'm homeless, not why I deserve your attention. So let me answer the question you should be asking instead. Can I add value to this project?" He walked to the presentation screen at the front of the room. "May I?" Sarah Mitchell nodded, her expression unreadable. Marcus pulled up the schematics for Vertex's thermal regulation system. He studied them for approximately 30 seconds. "Your primary cooling loop is well designed, but you have a potential cascade failure point where the secondary and tertiary systems intersect. Under sustained load, the pressure differential will cause microfractures in the connector housing." He pointed to a specific junction. "This is the same design flaw that was in the Zenith Aurora's engine. The same flaw I warned Aerostar about 5 years ago. The same flaw that I repaired this morning with pencil graphite and emergency sealant." One of the investors leaned forward. "You're saying our multi-million-dollar project has the same problem as a car engine?" "I'm saying the fundamental physics are identical regardless of the application. Heat is heat, pressure is pressure. The materials may be more sophisticated, but the failure modes are predictable. Can it be fixed?" Marcus picked up a marker and began sketching on the whiteboard beside the screen. "Not just fixed, improved. If you modify the junction geometry here and here, you eliminate the pressure differential entirely. The cooling efficiency increases by approximately 34%, and you remove a major point of potential failure." He continued sketching, his hand moving with the confidence of someone who had spent decades visualizing complex systems. "Additionally, your current design requires custom fabricated coolant with a 14-week lead time. I can show you a modification that allows the use of a standard industrial coolant with comparable performance. Manufacturing costs drop by approximately 40%. The investors were staring at the whiteboard with expressions ranging from disbelief to barely concealed excitement. William spoke again, but his tone had shifted. Dr. Thompson, how long would it take you to implement these modifications? The design changes can be completed in approximately 2 weeks. Implementation and testing would take another month. You could have a revised prototype ready for demonstration in 6 weeks. Our current timeline is 4 months. Your current timeline is based on a flawed design that will require extensive rework when the cascade failure manifests during testing. My timeline accounts for getting it right the first time. Another investor spoke up. She was younger than the others, with sharp eyes and an MIT ring on her finger. Dr. Thompson, I recognize your name. I studied your work in graduate school. Your quantum thermal regulation paper changed how I thought about heat management in closed systems. She paused. I also remember when the accusations against you came out. I was disappointed. I thought you had actually done what they claimed. Marcus met her gaze. Many people did. I'm sorry. Thank you. What I want to know is this: if we invest in this project with you involved, what guarantee do we have that you'll stay, that you won't disappear again? Marcus considered the question carefully. I can't guarantee anything about the future. None of us can. But I can tell you this. I didn't disappear by choice 3 years ago. I was pushed out and locked out. Every door was closed to me. I spent 3 years trying to find a way back in. He looked around the room at each investor in turn. This is my way back in. You think I would walk away from that? You think I would throw away the opportunity I've been fighting for since I lost everything? The young investor nodded slowly. Fair enough. David stepped forward. Ladies and gentlemen, I propose we proceed with our presentation as planned, but with Dr. Thompson's involvement as a consultant for the duration of the project. If his contributions prove as valuable as I believe they will, we can discuss a more permanent arrangement. William glanced at his fellow investors. Some silent communication passed between them. We'll need to verify Dr. Thompson's credentials independently. Already done. Sarah Mitchell pulled out her tablet. I contacted Spacetech this morning after Dr. Chen's call. They confirmed his employment history, his patent contributions, and his standing offer of employment with their company. Standing offer? Apparently, Dr. Chen has been trying to reach Dr. Thompson for 3 years. The offer she mentioned this morning has been open since he was exonerated. William's eyebrows rose. Spacetech wants him. Spacetech has been waiting for him. I suspect by end of day today, they won't be the only ones. At precisely that moment, William's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression shifted. It seems you're right. I just received an email from the CEO of Meridian Technologies asking if we're working with a Dr. Marcus Thompson and if we'd be willing to share his contact information. David smiled. I believe Dr. Thompson's value speaks for itself. The presentation resumed at 11:15 a.m., but everything had changed. What had been planned as a straightforward funding pitch had become something else entirely. Every few minutes, an investor would ask Marcus a technical question. Every answer he gave demonstrated mastery that the regular Vertex team couldn't match. By noon, the formal presentation was over, but the real conversation was just beginning. The investors gathered around Marcus at the conference table, their tablets displaying the schematics he had sketched, their questions coming fast and focused. This modification you mentioned, the one that allows standard coolant. How did you develop it? In the public library, Marcus said, using their computer systems to run thermal simulations during the hours I wasn't sleeping or looking for food. The room went quiet. You developed this while homeless? Yes. On library computers? Yes. Do you have documentation? Marcus reached into the inner pocket of his borrowed suit and pulled out a worn notebook. The pages were filled with dense calculations, diagrams, and notes in precise handwriting. I have 3 of these. This one contains the coolant modification. The others contain work on quantum neural network cooling and atmospheric processing for closed habitats. William took the notebook carefully as if it were made of glass. These are potentially patentable innovations. I'm aware. I've documented everything according to patent filing requirements. I was an engineer, Mr. Harrington. I didn't stop being one just because I lost my address. William looked up at Marcus with an expression that might have been respect. Dr. Thompson, I came into this meeting with significant reservations about your involvement. I'm leaving with significant reservations about any project that doesn't include you. He closed the notebook and handed it back. You have my vote. Full funding with Dr. Thompson as lead consultant. One by one, the other investors nodded their agreement. David exhaled slowly, relief evident on his face. Thank you, everyone. I think we've just witnessed the beginning of something remarkable. Marcus stood very still, the notebook in his hands. He had imagined this moment countless times during the long nights in the shelter. He had pictured what it would feel like to be recognized again, to be valued again, to matter again. He had thought it would feel like triumph. Instead, it felt like grief. All the years he had lost, all the work he could have done, all the contributions he could have made. Stolen by a lie and a system too comfortable to question it. Dr. Thompson. Sarah Mitchell's voice was gentle. Are you all right? Marcus looked up. I'm processing. Take your time. I've had 3 years to process. That's not what I need. He straightened his shoulders. What I need is to get to work. The meeting concluded at 12:47 p.m. As the investors filed out, each stopping to shake Marcus's hand and offer their cards. David pulled him aside. How do you feel? Marcus considered the question. Like someone who almost drowned and is still coughing up water. That's more honest than I expected. You asked. David nodded. The offer I made this morning stands. Lead consultant for the thermal regulation project. Full creative control over the modifications you proposed. Compensation commensurate with your experience and contributions. That's a generous offer. It's a fair offer. You're worth more than any consultant we've ever hired. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I need to return to the shelter. David blinked. What? I have responsibilities there. Children who are expecting me for tonight's engineering class. People who depend on the routine I've established. I can't just disappear because something better came along. David's expression shifted from confusion to something deeper. You want to go back to the shelter? Today, after everything that's happened. I want to honor the commitments I made when no one else was offering me anything. Those children don't care about investor meetings or patent portfolios. They care that the man who promised to teach them about circuits shows up when he says he will. For a long moment, David simply stared at Marcus. Then he laughed a sound of genuine warmth. Dr. Thompson, you continue to exceed every expectation I have, and I say that as someone who watches you fix my car with pencils this morning. I'll accept your consulting offer, but I have conditions. Name them. Marcus's eyes grew serious. I won't just fix your project. I want to help fix the system, the hiring practices that filter out people like me. The algorithms that reject applications from anyone with a gap in their employment history. The cultural biases that make assumptions about capability based on address or appearance. David listened without interrupting. I'm not interested in being the exception that proves the rule. I'm interested in changing the rule so there don't need to be exceptions. That's a much bigger project than thermal regulation. Yes, it is. Are you interested? David extended his hand. Dr. Thompson, I'm more than interested. I'm committed. Marcus shook it. Then we have a deal. At 1:23 p.m., they left Vertex Technologies together. David's driver was waiting with the SUV. Where to, sir? David looked at Marcus. The West Side Shelter. Dr. Thompson has a class to teach. The driver nodded without visible reaction, but Marcus caught the slight widening of his eyes in the rearview mirror. The man who had just secured millions in investment funding was asking to be driven to a homeless shelter. As they pulled into traffic, Marcus's phone buzzed. It was the phone David had given him earlier, loaded with contact information and connected to Vertex's network. The screen showed 17 missed calls and 43 new messages. "Word spreads fast," David observed. "Too fast." Marcus set the phone aside without responding to any of the messages. "I'm not ready for this." Ready for what? For the attention, the expectations, the pressure to perform constantly to justify the opportunity I've been given. David was quiet for a moment. "Can I tell you something? When I started Vertex 12 years ago, I was terrified every single day. I felt like a fraud. Like any moment, someone would realize I didn't deserve to be there. Imposter syndrome. It's common among high achievers." "Yes. But here's what I learned: the fear never goes away entirely. You just learn to work alongside it. You learn to show up even when you're terrified. You learn that showing up is the only thing that matters." Marcus looked out the window at the city passing by. "I've been showing up for 3 years. To the library, to the shelter, to the small acts of dignity and purpose that kept me sane. Showing up has never been my problem." "Then what has—" Marcus turned to face him. "Being seen, being heard. Having someone actually look at me and acknowledge that I exist." His voice was steady, but something raw flickered beneath the surface. "This morning, you looked right at me and saw nothing but a threat. That's been my reality for 3 years. Today is the first day anyone has really seen me since I lost everything." David had no response. They drove in silence for several minutes. At 2:15 p.m., they arrived at the West Side Emergency Shelter. It was a modest building, clean, but worn, with a faded sign and barred windows. A few people sat on the steps outside, watching the expensive SUV pull up with expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion. Marcus opened his door. "Thank you for the ride, and for the opportunity. When should I expect you at Vertex?" "Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. I'll bring my notebooks." "I'll have an office ready for you." Marcus paused, one foot on the pavement. "Mr. Harrington," David. "What happened today, the meeting, the investors, all of it, that wasn't about me. It was about changing how you see people like me. Don't forget that when the attention fades and things go back to normal." David nodded slowly. "I won't forget." Marcus stepped out of the SUV and walked toward the shelter entrance. Several of the people on the steps stood as he approached, their faces showing recognition and confusion. "Marcus, that you? That's a nice suit, man. What happened? You win the lottery or something?" Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile he had allowed himself all day. "Something like that." He walked inside, leaving the expensive SUV and the billionaire behind, leaving the investors and the contracts and the promises behind. Walking back into the world he had inhabited for 3 years, but walking differently now, walking like a man who had finally been seen. Inside the shelter, a group of children was already waiting in the common room, their makeshift engineering supplies spread across a battered table. Cardboard tubes, batteries, wires, LED lights salvaged from discarded electronics. "Mr. Marcus, you're late." A girl of about 9, her hair in braids, looked up at him with accusation and relief mixed in equal parts. "I know, Destiny. I'm sorry. I got held up." "You look different. Why are you wearing that suit?" Marcus knelt down to her level. "Because today I had to remind some people that how someone looks doesn't tell you anything about who they are." Destiny considered this. "Did it work?" Marcus smiled. "I think it did." "Good. Now can we finish the circuit you promised we'd make the lights turn on today?" Marcus took off his borrowed jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and joined the children at the table. "I promised, and I always keep my promises." Behind him, through the shelter's dirty window, David Harrington's SUV remained parked at the curb. The billionaire sat inside, watching Marcus work with the children, watching the man who had saved his car and challenged his assumptions, now patiently explaining electrical current to a 9-year-old girl with braids. David picked up his phone and made a call. "Sarah, it's me. I need you to do something. Put together a proposal for a youth STEM program, something that provides real equipment and real instruction to kids in underserved communities." He paused, still watching through the window. "Call it the Thompson Initiative, and make it big enough to matter." He ended the call and finally signaled his driver to leave. Inside the shelter, Marcus looked up briefly as the SUV pulled away. Then he turned back to Destiny and her circuit. "Okay, let's make some lights turn on." The next morning arrived faster than Marcus expected. He had slept fitfully on his shelter cot, the events of the previous day replaying in fragments through his dreams. The shove, the smoke, Patricia's voice cracking through the phone, the investors' faces shifting from skepticism to wonder. At 6:47 a.m., he was already awake, staring at the ceiling. The suit David had given him hung on a nail beside his cot, impossibly clean and expensive against the worn walls. His shelter ID sat on the small table next to his notebooks, 2 versions of himself existing in the same space. "You gonna wear that fancy suit again?" Marcus turned his head. Old Raymond, the Vietnam veteran who occupied the cot beside his, was watching him with knowing eyes. "I have to. I'm starting a new job today." Raymond whistled low. "Job? After all this time? How's that feel?" Marcus considered the question. "Terrifying." Raymond laughed, a dry sound that turned into a cough. "Good. Means you still got something to lose. Moment you stop being scared is the moment you stop caring." Marcus sat up and swung his legs over the edge of the cot. "Raymond, what would you do if you suddenly had a chance to go back to your old life?" The old man was quiet for a long moment. "I'd remember that the old life is what broke me in the first place. Whatever you're going back to, make sure you're going back different. Otherwise, you'll just end up here again." At 7:15 a.m., Marcus showered in the shelter's communal bathroom. The water was lukewarm and the pressure was weak, but he stood under it longer than necessary, letting it wash away 3 years of accumulated fear. When he emerged dressed in the Armani suit, the shelter's common room fell silent. 40 pairs of eyes watched him walk toward the exit. Men and women he had lived beside, eaten beside, suffered beside. Some he had helped. Some had helped him. All of them understood what this moment meant. Destiny ran up and grabbed his hand. "Mr. Marcus, you're leaving." He knelt down to her level. "Not leaving. Just going to work. I'll be back tonight for our class." "Promise?" "I promise." She hugged him fiercely, her small arms tight around his neck. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright with tears she was trying not to shed. "You look like a superhero," she whispered. Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Superheroes don't wear suits, Destiny. They wear whatever they need to wear to get the job done." He stood and walked toward the door. As he reached for the handle, a voice called out from behind him. "Thompson!" He turned. It was Marcus Williams, the shelter coordinator, a heavy-set man with kind eyes and a perpetual frown. "Yeah. You come back tonight, you hear me? These people need to see that getting out is possible. That hope isn't just something we talk about." Marcus nodded. "I'll be back." He stepped outside at 7:34 a.m. into the gray morning light. A black sedan was waiting at the curb. Not David's SUV, but a company car with the Vertex logo on the door. A driver in a neat uniform stood beside it. "Dr. Thompson, I'm James. Mr. Harrington sent me to pick you up." Marcus hesitated for just a moment. Then he walked forward and climbed into the car. The drive to Vertex Technologies took 23 minutes through morning traffic. Marcus spent it reviewing the notes in his worn notebook, preparing himself for the work ahead. His phone buzzed. The screen showed 147 unread messages and 52 missed calls. He ignored them all except one. A text from Patricia Chen. "Call me when you get a chance. Important news about Aerostar." Marcus stared at the message. His stomach tightened. Whatever Patricia had learned, it was significant enough for her to reach out directly. He would call her after the morning meetings. At 8:02 a.m., the sedan pulled into Vertex Technologies' underground parking garage. Sarah Mitchell was waiting by the elevator. "Dr. Thompson, welcome to your first official day." "Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. Please call me Sarah. We're going to be working closely together." She fell into step beside him as they walked toward the elevator. "I should warn you, the story from yesterday has exploded. Every tech news outlet in the country has picked it up. We've had media requests from CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, and about 30 other outlets." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I'm not interested in being a media story." "I understand. David has arranged for our communications team to handle all inquiries. You won't have to deal with any of it unless you choose to." The elevator doors opened. They stepped inside. "There's something else," Sarah said as the doors closed. "Something more pressing." "What?" "Richard Morrison, the CEO of Tech Horizon, who was at the scene yesterday." Marcus remembered the silver-haired man who had tried to have him removed. The man whose company had rejected his application 3 years ago. "What about him?" "He's been making calls. To investors, to board members, to anyone who will listen. He's trying to discredit you." Marcus felt a cold weight settle in his chest. "What's he saying?" "That you're unstable, that your homelessness is evidence of mental illness, that involving you in any significant project is a liability risk." Sarah's expression was grim. "He's scared, Marcus. You represent everything his worldview can't accommodate. A brilliant mind that his system rejected and then tried to destroy." The elevator reached the 47th floor. "How much damage has he done?" "Some. 3 of the smaller investors have expressed concerns. They haven't withdrawn their commitments yet, but they're wavering." They stepped out into the executive suite. Through the glass walls, Marcus could see people working at their desks, glancing up as he passed. "David is aware of this?" he asked. "David is handling it. He's in a meeting right now with our legal team exploring options." They reached a corner office with Marcus's name already on the door. Dr. Marcus Thompson, lead consultant, Thermal Systems. "This is yours," Sarah said. "Everything you need should be inside. Computer, phone supplies. Your security badge is on the desk." Marcus stood in the doorway looking at the office that was now his. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A desk larger than his shelter cot. A chair that probably cost more than a month of meals. "It's strange," he said quietly. "I spent 3 years dreaming about moments like this. Now that it's here, I don't know how to feel." Sarah placed a hand on his arm. "Feel whatever you need to feel. Just don't let Richard Morrison take this from you. Not after everything you've survived." She left him alone with his new office. At 8:31 a.m., Marcus sat down at his desk and opened his laptop. The screen displayed the Vertex logo and a welcome message with his name. His phone buzzed again. "Patricia Chen," he answered. "Patricia." "Marcus. Thank God. I've been trying to reach you all morning." "I know. I'm sorry. It's been overwhelming." "I can imagine. Listen, I need to tell you something, and you need to sit down, if you're not already sitting." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "I'm sitting." "James Henderson, your former supervisor at Aerostar. He sent me those documents he mentioned yesterday." "The ones about the blacklist?" "Yes, but there's more. Much more." Patricia's voice was tight with controlled anger. "Marcus, they didn't just blacklist you. They fabricated evidence. The original accusations against you were based on falsified data. Data that was specifically created to frame you for the prototype failure." Marcus's hand gripped the phone so hard his knuckles went white. "What?" "It's all in the documents. Emails between the CEO and the head of engineering discussing how to alter the test results to make it look like you had deliberately sabotaged the project. They knew the failure was caused by their corner cutting. They chose to destroy you rather than admit their own negligence." The room seemed to tilt around Marcus. "They manufactured the accusations. From the beginning. From the very beginning." You were never under genuine investigation. The investigation itself was theater designed to drag out long enough to destroy your career and your finances. By the time you were exonerated, you were already broken. Marcus closed his eyes. 3 years. 3 years of sleeping on streets and in shelters. 3 years of rejection and invisibility. 3 years of slowly starving, while the people who had destroyed him continued their careers without consequence. All of it deliberate. All of it planned. Marcus, are you still there? I'm here. There's more. The documents also show that Aerostar's CEO, Gerald Foster, is now a major investor in a competing quantum computing project, a project that would be significantly threatened by the success of Vertex's thermal regulation system. Patricia paused. A project that would benefit enormously if Vertex's lead consultant was discredited and removed. The pieces clicked together in Marcus's mind. Richard Morrison, Tech Horizon. They're connected to Foster. Tech Horizon is a partial investor in Foster's new project. Morrison's attempts to discredit you aren't just personal prejudice. They're strategic. If he can get you removed from Vertex Foster's competing project, gains a significant advantage. Marcus opened his eyes. They're trying to destroy me again. The same people, the same tactics, just different circumstances. Yes. But this time you have evidence. This time you have allies. And this time you have the attention of the entire tech industry watching to see what happens. At 9:15 a.m., David Harrington knocked on Marcus's office door. Can I come in? Marcus nodded. David entered and closed the door behind him. His expression was serious. You've heard about Morrison. I've heard about more than Morrison. Marcus gestured to his phone. Patricia Chen just filled me in on the full picture. The fabricated evidence. You know about that. James Henderson sent copies to me as well. Our legal team has been reviewing them since last night. David sat down across from Marcus. What they did to you, Marcus, it's criminal. Literally criminal. We're talking fraud, defamation, conspiracy to destroy a career. Multiple felonies. Marcus stared at him. You're suggesting I could prosecute? I'm suggesting you could sue them into oblivion. The evidence James provided is comprehensive. Emails, memos, data files showing the original test results before they were altered. Everything needed to prove that Gerald Foster and his team deliberately framed you. Marcus was silent for a long moment. If I sue, it becomes a media circus. Every detail of my life for the past 3 years becomes public fodder. Every night I slept on a sidewalk, every meal I missed, every job application that was rejected. All of it dissected and analyzed by people who have never known what it means to be invisible. David leaned forward. And if you don't sue, Foster continues his career. Morrison continues spreading lies about you. The system that destroyed you continues destroying others. He paused. This isn't just about you anymore, Marcus. It's about everyone else who's been chewed up and spit out by people like Foster. People who don't have evidence. People who don't have a platform. People who are still sleeping on sidewalks because no one believes them. Marcus turned to look out the window. The city spread out below him, millions of people living their lives, most of them unaware of the systems that determine their fates. You're asking me to become a symbol. I'm asking you to be what you already are. A man who refused to give up. A man who maintained his dignity and his brilliance despite everything that was done to him. A man who fixed my car with pencils because no one could take away what was inside his head. At 10:03 a.m., Marcus made his decision. He picked up his phone and called Patricia Chen. Patricia, I need you to do something for me. Anything. Contact every major tech publication. Tell them I'm prepared to give a full interview about what happened to me at Aerostar. Tell them I have documentation proving that I was deliberately framed. Tell them the same people who destroyed my career are now trying to sabotage Vertex's quantum computing project. Patricia's breath caught. Marcus, are you sure? Once you do this, there's no going back. I've spent 3 years going back. trying to disappear, trying to survive without making waves. His voice hardened. I'm done surviving. It's time to fight. The next 3 hours were a blur of activity. At 10:47 a.m., Vertex's legal team arrived in Marcus's office with a stack of documents. They walked him through the evidence James Henderson had provided, explaining how each piece connected to form an undeniable pattern of deliberate destruction. At 11:23 a.m., Patricia Chen called back with confirmation that the New York Times, Washington Post, and TechCrunch had all agreed to simultaneous publication of the story. Interviews were scheduled for the following day. At 12:15 p.m., David returned with news that two of the wavering investors had reversed their positions after being briefed on Morrison's connection to Gerald Foster. The third investor had withdrawn entirely, but David had already secured a replacement. At 1:08 p.m., Marcus's phone rang with an unknown number. He answered. "Dr. Thompson, this is Gerald Foster." Marcus's blood went cold. "How did you get this number?" "That's not important. What's important is that we need to talk. Before you do something you'll regret." Marcus's grip on the phone tightened. "Something I'll regret, like having my career destroyed based on fabricated evidence, like spending 3 years homeless because you needed a scapegoat. I understand you're upset, but I think you're operating on incomplete information. I have the emails, Foster. I have the memos. I have the original test data showing the results before your team altered them. My information is very complete." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Those documents were obtained illegally. They would never be admissible in court. "I'm not going to court. I'm going to the press. The court of public opinion doesn't care about admissibility." Another pause. When Foster spoke again, his voice had changed. The smooth corporate tone was gone, replaced by something harder. "Dr. Thompson, let me be very clear. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I have resources you can't imagine, connections that reach into every major institution in this industry. If you pursue this course of action, I will destroy you more completely than I did 3 years ago." Marcus felt something shift inside him. The fear that had governed his existence for 3 years, the constant anxiety of vulnerability and exposure, suddenly seemed very small. "Mr. Foster, 3 years ago, you took everything from me. My career, my home, my reputation, my future. You left me with nothing but the clothes on my back and the knowledge in my head." He paused. "And you know what I discovered? You can't destroy someone who has nothing left to lose. You can't threaten someone who has already survived your worst. I fixed a $4 million car with pencils and emergency sealant. I developed patentable innovations on library computers. I taught engineering to homeless children with salvaged electronics." His voice rose. "You didn't break me, Foster. You just forced me to discover exactly how unbreakable I am. So go ahead. Bring your resources. Bring your connections. Bring everything you have. Because I promise you I will still be standing when it's over. And you won't." He ended the call. His hands were shaking, his heart was pounding, but for the first time in 3 years, Marcus Thompson felt fully alive. At 2:34 p.m., the first counterstrike came. David burst into Marcus's office with his phone in hand. "We have a problem. Someone just leaked your shelter records to the press. Medical evaluations, intake interviews, everything. They're trying to paint you as mentally unstable." Marcus felt the familiar cold grip of fear. "How bad is it?" "Bad. The documents include notes from a counselor suggesting you showed signs of depression and possible paranoia. They're framing it as proof that your claims against Foster are delusions." Sarah Mitchell appeared in the doorway. "It's worse than that. Morrison just held an impromptu press conference. He's claiming that Vertex is endangering investors by placing a mentally ill homeless person in a leadership position. He's demanding that the SEC investigate." Marcus stood frozen. The walls of his new office suddenly felt like they were closing in. 3 years of survival instincts screamed at him to run, to disappear, to retreat to the shadows where he was safe, where no one could see him, where no one could hurt him. But another voice, quieter but stronger, reminded him of what he had just told Foster. You can't destroy someone who has nothing left to lose. Get me in front of a camera, Marcus said. David and Sarah exchanged glances. What? Morrison wants to make this about my mental state. Fine. Let's give the public a chance to judge for themselves. Get me a press conference. Today, right now. David hesitated. Marcus, that's exactly what they want. If you go out there and make a mistake, say the wrong thing, show any sign of instability, it's over. Then I won't make a mistake. Sarah stepped forward. Marcus, with all due respect, you've been through an enormous amount in the last 24 hours. The emotional toll alone would destabilize anyone. Are you certain you're ready for this? Marcus looked at her. Dr. Mitchell, I spent 3 years invisible. 3 years being told I didn't matter, didn't exist, didn't deserve to be seen. Today the whole world is watching, and you're asking if I'm ready to be seen. He smiled, but there was steel behind it. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. At 3:47 p.m., Marcus Thompson stood behind a podium in Vertex Technologies' main conference hall. The room was packed. Reporters from every major outlet jostled for position. Cameras lined the back wall. The story had grown beyond anyone's expectations, and everyone wanted to witness what happened next. David stood to Marcus's left, Sarah to his right. Behind them, a screen displayed the Vertex logo and the words, Press Conference, Dr. Marcus Thompson. Marcus adjusted the microphone. The room fell silent. Thank you all for coming. I know there's been a lot of speculation about me in the past 24 hours, so I want to address it directly. He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Yesterday morning, I was a homeless man living in a shelter. I had been homeless for 3 years, ever since I was falsely accused of sabotaging a prototype at Aerostar Industries. Those accusations were eventually proven false, but by then, my life had already been destroyed. He held up a stack of papers. What I have here are documents provided by a former Aerostar employee. Documents that prove the accusations against me weren't just false. They were deliberately fabricated. Created by Aerostar's leadership to cover up their own negligence and protect their own careers. A murmur ran through the crowd. I was chosen as the scapegoat for one simple reason: I was convenient. A black engineer with no powerful connections. Someone who could be sacrificed without consequence. He set the papers down. They were wrong. A reporter shouted from the crowd. Dr. Thompson, Richard Morrison has claimed that your mental health records show signs of instability. How do you respond? Marcus nodded. I'm glad you asked that. Yes. During my time at the shelter, I was evaluated by counselors. Yes, those evaluations showed signs of depression. You know what causes depression? Losing everything you've worked for based on lies. Watching your career disintegrate. Sleeping on sidewalks while the people who destroyed you continue living in luxury. He leaned forward. Depression isn't evidence of instability. It's evidence of humanity. I was depressed because something terrible happened to me. I sought help. I worked through it, and I emerged stronger. He paused. If Mr. Morrison believes that experiencing depression disqualifies someone from professional achievement, I would suggest he review the biographies of Abraham Lincoln, Winston Churchill, and about half of the greatest innovators in human history. Scattered applause broke out in the room. Another reporter jumped in. Dr. Thompson, what do you say to those who question whether someone who was homeless can be trusted with multi-million-dollar projects? Marcus smiled. I say this: yesterday morning, I fixed a $4 million hypercar with pencils and emergency sealant. A repair that the manufacturer claimed was impossible. A repair that saved the car and allowed its owner to attend a meeting that secured significant investment for this company. He gestured to David. Mr. Harrington can confirm the details. The point is this: my homelessness was never a reflection of my capabilities. It was a reflection of a system that abandons people when they need help most. A system that judges worth by address instead of ability. A system that I intend to help change. The questions continued for another 40 minutes. Marcus answered everyone with calm precision. He explained the technical details of the Aerostar incident. He described the documents proving fabrication. He outlined his vision for systemic change in hiring practices. By the time the press conference ended at 4:52 p.m., the narrative had shifted entirely. Morrison's accusations looked petty and desperate. Foster's threats looked like consciousness of guilt. And Marcus Thompson looked exactly like what he was, a brilliant man who had been wronged and refused to be silent about it. At 5:15 p.m., Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Chen. "Watching from Space Tech. You were magnificent. The board just voted unanimously to file an amicus brief supporting any legal action you take against Aerostar. You're not alone anymore." At 5:23 p.m., another text. This one from James Henderson. "Foster just resigned from Aerostar's board, effective immediately. The rats are fleeing the ship." At 5:41 p.m., David knocked on Marcus's office door. "Morrison just withdrew his SEC complaint. His own board is reportedly furious with him for the public relations disaster. There's talk of a vote of no confidence." Marcus sat in his chair, staring at the city lights beginning to twinkle below. "It's not over," he said quietly. "People like Foster and Morrison don't give up after one defeat. They regroup. They find new angles. They wait." "I know." David sat down across from him. "But today we won. Today you stood in front of the world and told your truth. That matters." Marcus nodded slowly. "Do you know what I kept thinking about during that press conference, Destiny? The little girl from the shelter. The one who said I looked like a superhero this morning. What about her? I kept thinking about all the Destinies out there. Kids who are one bad break away from losing everything. Kids who might have genius inside them that never gets discovered because the system writes them off before they have a chance." He turned to face David. "I meant what I said yesterday. About wanting to change the system, not just succeed within it. The Thompson Initiative you mentioned. I want to make it real. Not just a STEM program, but a complete rethinking of how we identify and nurture talent regardless of circumstances." David nodded. "I've already started the groundwork. But it's your vision, Marcus. You should lead it." "I intend to." At 6:17 p.m., Marcus left Vertex Technologies. The same driver James was waiting with the sedan. "Where to, Dr. Thompson?" Marcus thought for a moment. "The West Side Shelter. I have a promise to keep." The drive took longer in evening traffic. Marcus used the time to review messages on his phone. Hundreds of them now. Interview requests, job offers, messages of support from strangers who had seen his story and been moved. One message stood out. It was from a number he didn't recognize, with a 617 area code. Boston. "Dr. Thompson, my name is Amanda Foster. I'm Gerald Foster's daughter. I saw your press conference today. I need to talk to you. What my father did to you, there's more you don't know. Much more. Please call me. It's urgent." Marcus stared at the message. Gerald Foster's daughter wanted to talk to him about things he didn't know, things that were urgent. The sedan pulled up to the West Side Shelter at 6:43 p.m. Marcus sat in the car for a long moment, looking at the message. Then he slipped the phone into his pocket and stepped out. Whatever Amanda Foster wanted to tell him, it could wait until tomorrow. Tonight, he had a promise to keep. Inside the shelter, Destiny was waiting with her circuit board, her eyes lighting up the moment she saw him. "Mr. Marcus, you came back. I told you I would. Everyone's talking about you. The TV people say you're famous now." Marcus knelt down to her level. "Fame doesn't matter, Destiny. What matters is keeping your promises. What matters is showing up for the people who count on you." He smiled. "Now, are you ready to make those lights turn on?" Destiny grinned. "I've been ready all day." They sat down at the battered table surrounded by salvaged electronics and borrowed tools and got to work. Outside, the world continued its chaos. Gerald Foster was strategizing his next move. Richard Morrison was facing the consequences of his miscalculation. Journalists were writing stories that would shape public opinion for days to come. But inside the shelter, none of that mattered. Inside the shelter, there was only a man who had lost everything, a girl who had never had much, and the simple magic of a circuit finally connecting and lights beginning to glow. Marcus called Amanda Foster at 7:23 a.m. the next morning. He had spent a restless night at the shelter, her message burning in his mind. Gerald Foster's daughter. What could she possibly want to tell him? What secrets could be more damaging than what he already knew? The phone rang twice before she answered. Dr. Thompson. Her voice was younger than he expected, nervous, almost frightened. Ms. Foster, you said you needed to talk, that it was urgent. Yes, but not over the phone. Can we meet in person, somewhere private? Marcus hesitated. How do I know this isn't a trap your father threatened to destroy me yesterday? I know what my father is. That's exactly why I'm calling. She paused. Dr. Thompson, I've been carrying this guilt for 3 years. 3 years of knowing what he did to you and being too afraid to speak up. I can't do it anymore. Please, let me make this right. Something in her voice rang true. The desperation, the shame. Marcus had heard those tones before in the voices of people at the shelter who had finally decided to face their demons. There's a coffee shop on Market Street, Groundwork Coffee. I can be there in an hour. I'll find it. And Dr. Thompson. Come alone. If my father finds out I'm talking to you, I don't know what he'll do. At 8:31 a.m., Marcus walked into Groundwork Coffee. He spotted her immediately. A woman in her late 20s, dark hair pulled back, expensive clothes that hung on her frame like they belonged to someone else. She sat in the corner booth, hands wrapped around a cup she hadn't touched. When she saw him, her eyes filled with tears. Dr. Thompson, thank you for coming. He slid into the seat across from her. Ms. Foster. Amanda, please. Amanda, you said there was more I didn't know. She nodded, her hands trembling slightly. I was 23 when it happened, fresh out of business school working in my father's company. I thought I was learning the family business. I thought I was becoming part of something legitimate. She took a shaky breath. Then I found the emails, the ones about you. I was organizing my father's files for a board presentation, and I accidentally accessed a folder I wasn't supposed to see. Marcus leaned forward. What was in it? Everything. The original test results. The altered versions. The communications planning how to frame you. The blacklist instructions sent to every major tech company. Her voice cracked. I confronted my father. I told him what I'd found. I threatened to go to the authorities. What did he do? Amanda's face crumpled. He showed me what would happen if I did. He had files on me too. Photos from college, financial records that could be manipulated to look like fraud. He said if I ever spoke up, he would destroy me the same way he destroyed you. Marcus sat back processing this. He blackmailed his own daughter into silence. He's been doing it for 3 years. Every time I've tried to break free, he finds another way to tighten his grip. She pulled a flash drive from her purse with shaking hands. But I'm done. Whatever he does to me, it can't be worse than carrying this guilt. She pushed the flash drive across the table. This has everything. Not just what James Henderson gave you. Everything. Internal communications going back 10 years. Other people he's destroyed. Other careers he's ruined. You're not the first, Dr. Thompson. You're just the first one who survived long enough to fight back. Marcus stared at the small device. Why now? Why today? Because I watched your press conference yesterday. I saw you stand up there and tell the truth despite everything, and I realized that if you could be that brave after what he did to you, I had no excuse for staying silent. At 9:15 a.m., Marcus returned to Vertex Technologies with the flash drive. David was waiting in the lobby, his expression tense. Where have you been? We have a situation. What kind of situation? Morrison. He's not backing down. He filed a formal complaint with the SEC this morning, claiming that Vertex misrepresented your credentials to investors. He's demanding a full investigation. Marcus felt the familiar tightening in his chest. But this time, it was mixed with something else, something that felt like anticipation. Good. David stared at him. Good, Marcus. An SEC investigation could freeze our funding. It could destroy everything we've built. Marcus held up the flash drive. I just met with Gerald Foster's daughter. She gave me this. Foster's daughter. She's been blackmailed into silence for 3 years. But she's done. This drive contains documentation of Foster's entire operation. Every person he's destroyed, every crime he's committed. Morrison's complaint is about to become the least of Foster's problems. They took the elevator to the executive floor in silence. In David's office, Sarah Mitchell and the legal team were already assembled. Their faces showed the strain of fighting a battle on multiple fronts. We have a problem, Sarah began. Morrison's SEC complaint names specific investors who have expressed concerns. If even one of them formally withdraws support, it could trigger a cascade effect. How long do we have? David asked. The SEC has fast-tracked the preliminary review. We'll know within 48 hours whether they're opening a full investigation. Marcus stepped forward and placed the flash drive on the table. This changes everything. For the next hour, they reviewed the contents of Amanda Foster's drive. What they found was staggering. Gerald Foster hadn't just destroyed Marcus. He had systematically eliminated anyone who threatened his position over a 15-year period. Engineers who challenged his decisions. Executives who questioned his ethics. Competitors who got too close to his market share. At least 11 people had been subjected to the same treatment Marcus received. False accusations, fabricated evidence, coordinated blacklisting. Some had left the industry entirely. Some had suffered breakdowns. 2 had died by suicide. At 10:47 a.m., Sarah Mitchell set down the tablet she had been reading. This is criminal. We're talking about conspiracy fraud racketeering. This isn't just a civil matter. This is federal prosecution territory. David turned to Marcus. What do you want to do? Marcus looked around the room at the faces watching him. These people had taken a chance on him. They had believed in him when the world called him crazy. They deserved to know what kind of fight they were in. I want to end him, not just expose him, end him. And I want to do it in a way that protects everyone he's ever hurt. The legal team's lead counsel, a sharp-eyed woman named Victoria Chen, leaned forward. Dr. Thompson, with this evidence, we could approach the FBI directly. Let them handle the prosecution. And how long would that take? Months, years. Meanwhile, Morrison continues his attacks, Foster continues his threats, and the people depending on this project continue to suffer. Victoria nodded slowly. What's your alternative? We go public. Today. All of it. Every document, every victim, every crime. We give it to the press, to law enforcement, to everyone simultaneously. We make it impossible to cover up, impossible to spin, impossible to escape. David stood. That's extremely risky. If Foster has any allies left, they could retaliate. They could attack Vertex directly. They're already attacking Vertex. Morrison's SEC complaint proves that. Marcus's voice hardened. The only way to stop a bully is to make sure everyone sees who he really is. Foster has operated in shadows for 15 years. Let's see how he does in the light. At 11:23 a.m., Marcus made a call. Patricia, I need your help. And SpaceTech's. What do you need? I need you to host a press conference, today, at SpaceTech headquarters. A press conference about what? About Gerald Foster. About what he did to me, and about what he did to 11 other people over 15 years. I have documentation of everything. But I need credibility. I need a major institution standing behind me when I present it. Patricia was silent for a moment. This is dangerous, Marcus. Foster has powerful friends. I know. But those friends are only loyal because they think he's untouchable. Once they see the evidence, they'll abandon him to save themselves. Another pause. SpaceTech's board will need to approve this. How fast can you get them together? Give me an hour. At 12:15 p.m., Patricia called back. It's done. The board approved unanimously. They've been wanting to address what happened to you for years. This gives them the opportunity. She paused. Press conference is scheduled for 3 p.m. Pacific. Every major outlet has been notified. Marcus, this is really happening. I know. Are you ready? Marcus looked around his office. The office he had occupied for less than 48 hours. The office that represented everything he had lost and everything he might still become. I've been ready for 3 years. The next 2 hours were a blur of preparation. At 12:43 p.m., Victoria Chen finished drafting a legal statement outlining the evidence against Foster without making actionable claims that could trigger defamation suits. At 1:17 p.m., David's communications team prepared a synchronized release strategy coordinating with SpaceTech's PR department to ensure maximum coverage. At 1:45 p.m., Marcus received a text from Amanda Foster. My father knows I talked to you. He's on his way to SpaceTech. Be careful. Marcus showed the message to David. Foster is coming. Should we postpone? No, if he wants to be there when his empire falls, let him watch. At 2:22 p.m., Marcus arrived at SpaceTech headquarters. The building was massive, a gleaming testament to aerospace innovation. He had walked these halls thousands of times during his years as lead engineer. Now, he was returning as something else entirely. Patricia met him in the lobby. The press room is packed, standing room only. I've never seen anything like it. Is Foster here? Not yet. But our security team has been alerted. If he shows up, he'll be escorted to a private viewing area. He won't be able to disrupt the conference. They walked together toward the press room. Patricia, I need to tell you something. What? Thank you. For believing in me. For keeping that job offer open for 3 years. For being willing to stand with me now. Patricia stopped walking and turned to face him. Marcus, you were the best engineer I ever worked with. Losing you was devastating for this company. Losing you was devastating for me personally. Her eyes glistened. Watching you today, watching you fight back after everything they did, it's the proudest I've ever been of anyone. Marcus squeezed her hand briefly. Let's finish this. At 2:58 p.m., Marcus stood backstage listening to the murmur of the assembled press. Patricia was introducing him. He heard fragments of her speech. Distinguished engineer. Falsely accused. Fighting for justice. Systemic abuse. Then he heard his name. Please welcome Dr. Marcus Thompson. He walked onto the stage. The flashbulbs were blinding. The noise was overwhelming. Hundreds of faces stared up at him, waiting to hear what he would say. Marcus adjusted the microphone. 2 days ago, I was sleeping on a cot in a homeless shelter. I had been there, or in places like it, for 3 years. Not because I was mentally ill. Not because I was incapable of working. But because I was the victim of a deliberate, coordinated campaign to destroy my life. He held up a folder. What I'm about to share with you is documentation of that campaign. But more importantly, it's documentation of a pattern. A pattern that extends beyond me to at least 11 other individuals over a 15-year period. A pattern orchestrated by one man, Gerald Foster, former CEO of Aerostar Industries. A murmur rippled through the crowd. In 2019, a prototype at Aerostar failed during testing. The failure was caused by management decisions to override safety protocols. Rather than accept responsibility, Gerald Foster chose to frame me for sabotage. Evidence was fabricated. Test results were altered. False accusations were fed to investigators. He flipped open the folder. These are the original test results. These are the altered versions submitted to investigators. And these are the internal communications showing exactly who made the decision to frame me and how they did it. A reporter shouted from the crowd, "Dr. Thompson, how did you obtain these documents?" They were provided by a whistleblower with direct knowledge of Foster's operations. A whistleblower who has been threatened into silence for 3 years and has finally decided to come forward. Can you identify the whistleblower? Not at this time. Their safety is paramount. Another reporter jumped in. You mentioned 11 other victims. Who are they? I will not release their names without their consent, but the documentation includes their cases. Similar tactics were used against engineers, executives, and competitors who threatened Foster's position or exposed his misconduct. 2 of these individuals are no longer alive. The room went silent. Gerald Foster is not just a corporate bully. He is a predator who has destroyed careers, families, and lives to protect his own interests. And he has operated with impunity because no one had the evidence to stop him. Marcus looked directly into the cameras. Until now. At 3:34 p.m., the press conference was interrupted. Gerald Foster had arrived. He strode into the room with 4 security guards from his own company, his face red with fury. Space Tech security moved to intercept him, but he pushed past them. "This is a lie!" Foster shouted. "Everything this man is saying is a fabrication." The press turned as one, cameras swinging toward the confrontation. Patricia stepped forward. "Mr. Foster, you were not invited to this event. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "Leave? I'm being publicly accused of crimes by a homeless lunatic, and you want me to leave?" Marcus remained calm at the podium. "Mr. Foster, the documents speak for themselves. Would you like to explain why internal Aerostar communications discuss how to handle the Thompson problem? Would you like to explain why test results were altered in the week before investigators received them?" Foster's face contorted. "Those documents were stolen. They're inadmissible." "I'm not a court of law, Mr. Foster. I'm a press conference, and the public has a right to know what kind of man has been leading one of this country's most important technology companies." Foster lunged toward the stage. Space Tech security grabbed him before he could reach Marcus, but the cameras captured every second. "You'll pay for this!" Foster screamed as he was dragged toward the exit. "I will destroy you. I will destroy everyone who helped you." Marcus watched him go, his expression unchanging. "I believe," he said quietly into the microphone, "that Mr. Foster has demonstrated exactly the kind of behavior that made these crimes possible in the first place." The room erupted. At 4:17 p.m., the press conference concluded. Marcus stepped off the stage into a swarm of reporters shouting questions. Patricia and David flanked him, creating a path through the chaos. "Dr. Thompson, what happens next?" "Dr. Thompson, will you press criminal charges?" "Dr. Thompson, how does it feel to confront your accuser?" Marcus paused at the door and turned back to the crowd. "What happens next is simple. The evidence has been provided to the FBI, the SEC, and the Department of Justice. Gerald Foster will face the legal consequences of his actions. But this isn't just about one man. It's about a system that allowed him to operate unchecked for 15 years. He looked directly into the nearest camera. To anyone watching who has been victimized by someone in power, who has been silenced by threats, who has been told that fighting back is useless, I'm living proof that it isn't. Fight back. Speak up. Find allies. The truth is the most powerful weapon we have." He walked out. At 5:03 p.m., Marcus was in a private conference room at Space Tech when his phone rang. "Amanda Foster," he answered. "Amanda." "Dr. Thompson." Her voice was shaking. "He found out. About the drive. About everything. Are you safe?" "For now. I'm at a hotel, but he's threatening to disinherit me to ruin my name to do everything he did to you." Marcus felt a surge of protective anger. "Amanda, listen to me. Your father is finished. By this time tomorrow he'll be facing federal charges. His threats are empty. You don't understand. Even if he goes to prison, his money, his connections, they won't disappear. He has people who will do anything for him. Then we'll protect you. Space Tech has resources. Vertex has resources. You won't face this alone. A long pause. Why would you help me after what my family did to you? Because you're not your father. You had the courage to do the right thing when it cost you everything. That makes you one of us. He heard her crying softly on the other end. Thank you, Dr. Thompson. Call me Marcus. At 6:47 p.m., Marcus returned to the West Side shelter. The common room was packed. Someone had set up a television, and they had been watching the press conference coverage. When Marcus walked in, the entire room stood. Old Raymond started the applause. Then it spread. 40, 50, 60 people clapping and cheering for the man who had been one of them just days ago. The man who had stood up to power and won. Destiny pushed through the crowd and grabbed his hand. Mr. Marcus, I saw you on TV. You were amazing. Marcus knelt down to her level. I was scared, Destiny, the whole time. You didn't look scared. That's because being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing the right thing anyway. The shelter coordinator, Marcus Williams, approached with tears in his eyes. Thompson, what you did today, for all of us. Everyone who's ever been told they don't matter. Everyone who's been thrown away by the system. He struggled to find words. You showed them we're still here. We still count. Marcus stood and clasped his shoulder. I didn't do it alone. I had people who believed in me. People like you who gave me a place to sleep and a purpose to wake up for. He looked around the room at the faces watching him. Faces that had known hunger and fear and invisibility. Faces that were now shining with something that might have been hope. This isn't the end, Marcus said. This is the beginning. Gerald Foster was one man, but the system that protected him, the attitudes that made his crimes possible, those are still out there. We have a lot more work to do. Raymond called out from the back. So what's next, Thompson? Marcus smiled. Next, I keep the promise I made. We're going to change how this world sees people like us. We're going to build something that makes sure no one else falls through the cracks the way I did. He looked down at Destiny. And tonight, we're going to finish that circuit, because some promises are more important than press conferences. Destiny grinned. I already got the parts ready. They sat down at the battered table together, surrounded by salvaged electronics and borrowed tools, and got to work. Outside, the world continued spinning. Gerald Foster was being taken into custody by federal agents. Richard Morrison was resigning from Tech Horizon's board. News anchors were calling it the corporate scandal of the decade. But inside the shelter, none of that mattered. Inside the shelter, there was only a man who had lost everything and found something better. A girl who had never had much but now had hope and the simple magic of lights finally turning on. 6 months passed like a river finding its course. On a Tuesday morning in March, Marcus Thompson stood at the window of his corner office at Vertex Technologies, watching the sun rise over San Francisco. His reflection stared back at him, a man transformed but not forgotten. The phone on his desk buzzed. Dr. Thompson, your 8 a.m. is here. Send them in. The door opened. David Harrington entered, followed by Patricia Chen and Sarah Mitchell. Behind them came a face Marcus hadn't expected to see. Amanda Foster. She looked different now. 6 months of therapy, legal battles, and testifying against her father had changed her. The fear was gone from her eyes. In its place was something that looked like purpose. Good morning, everyone, Marcus said. Amanda, I didn't know you'd be joining us. She asked to come, David explained. Given what we're announcing today, it seemed appropriate. Marcus nodded and gestured to the conference table. Then let's begin. They sat. David opened a folder and slid it across to Marcus. The final numbers. The Thompson Initiative has now provided STEM education and career support to over 12,000 individuals across 47 cities. Employment placement rate is 73%. Average salary increase for participants is 340%. Patricia added, Space Tech has hired 127 Thompson Initiative graduates in the past 6 months. 17 of them are now team leads. 3 have patents pending. Sarah smiled. Vertex's numbers are similar. Our diversity metrics have improved by 400% since we integrated the initiative's screening protocols into our hiring process. Marcus looked at the numbers. 12,000 people. 12,000 lives changed. He thought of the nights he had spent on cold sidewalks, the meals he had skipped, the doors that had been closed in his face. It's not enough, he said quietly. The others exchanged glances. Marcus, David said carefully, these results are unprecedented. No corporate initiative in history has achieved this kind of impact this quickly. And for every person we've helped, there are 100 more we haven't reached. 1,000 more. The system is still broken. We've just built a better bandage. Amanda leaned forward. That's actually why I asked to come today. I have a proposal. Marcus turned to her. Go on. My father's assets were seized by the federal government after his conviction. Most of them will be distributed to his victims or used to pay fines. But there's a portion that was held in a family trust, a trust that I control. She pulled out a document and placed it on the table. $300 million. I want to donate it to the Thompson Initiative. All of it. The room went silent. Marcus stared at the document. Amanda, that's your inheritance, your future. No. Her voice was firm. That money was built on the destruction of people like you. Using it for my own comfort would make me complicit in everything my father did. She met his eyes. Let me use it to rebuild what he destroyed. Let me use it to make sure no one ever has to go through what you went through. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. This would make the Thompson Initiative one of the largest privately funded social programs in the country. Yes. We could expand to every major city. We could create permanent infrastructure. We could actually change the system instead of just working around it. That's the idea. Marcus looked around the table at the faces watching him. David, who had shoved him on a street corner, and then stood beside him against the most powerful forces in the industry. Patricia, who had kept faith for 3 years when everyone else had given up. Sarah, who had welcomed him into Vertex without hesitation. Amanda, who had risked everything to expose her own father. 6 months ago, Marcus said slowly, I was invisible. I was a problem to be removed, a threat to be neutralized, a failure to be forgotten. I had nothing except the knowledge in my head and the dignity I refused to surrender. He picked up Amanda's document. Today, I have the opportunity to ensure that no one else has to learn those lessons the way I did. That brilliance won't be wasted. That potential won't be discarded. That people won't be judged by their circumstances instead of their capabilities. He signed the document. Thank you, Amanda. Your father tried to destroy me. You've just helped me build something that will outlast both of us. At 9:47 a.m., the press conference began. The announcement of the expanded Thompson Initiative made national news. $300 million. 50 new cities. A comprehensive program that would identify overlooked talent, provide education and support, and create pathways to meaningful employment. But the real story wasn't the money. The real story came at 10:23 a.m. when Marcus invited a special guest to the stage. Destiny Williams walked up to the microphone, her braids swinging, her eyes bright with nervous excitement. She was 10 years old now, and she was about to address a room full of journalists. Hi, she said. My name is Destiny. I live at the West Side Shelter with my mom. Mr. Dr. Thompson teaches me about engineering. She held up a small device roughly the size of a smartphone. This is something I made. Dr. Thompson helped me, but I did most of it myself. It's a water quality tester. You put it in water and it tells you if the water is safe to drink. A murmur ran through the crowd. At my shelter, the water sometimes tastes funny. People get sick, so I wanted to make something that could help. She pressed a button and a small light turned green. Green means safe. Red means not safe. It costs about $12 to make because I used parts from broken phones and old computers. She looked out at the audience with the confidence of a child who had never been told she couldn't do something. Dr. Thompson says that smart people are everywhere. You just have to look for them in the right way. I think he's right, because I'm smart and nobody looked for me until he did. Marcus stepped up beside her. This is why the Thompson Initiative exists. Not because I want to prove anything about myself, but because there are thousands of destinies out there. Hundreds of thousands. Children and adults with extraordinary potential who are invisible to the systems designed to identify talent. He placed his hand on Destiny's shoulder. In the past 6 months, we've helped 12,000 people. With Amanda Foster's donation, we'll help millions. But numbers don't tell the whole story. The story is about individual lives, individual potential, individual brilliance that the world almost lost. He looked directly into the cameras. I was homeless for 3 years. I was invisible. I was forgotten. But I never stopped being brilliant. I never stopped being capable. I just stopped being seen. His voice rose. The Thompson Initiative exists to make sure that no one is ever invisible again. That potential is recognized regardless of address, appearance, or circumstance. That the next great engineer or scientist or innovator doesn't die on a sidewalk because the system couldn't see past their worn clothes. At 11:15 a.m., the press conference ended with a standing ovation. Marcus walked off stage into a crowd of supporters, well-wishers, and journalists still shouting questions. David and Patricia flanked him, creating a path through the chaos. Dr. Thompson, what's next for the initiative? Dr. Thompson, how does it feel to go from homeless to leading a $300 million program? Dr. Thompson, will you run for public office? Marcus paused at that last question. He turned to face the reporter who had asked it. I have no interest in political office. Politicians make promises. I prefer to build things. He walked on. At 12:03 p.m., Marcus returned to Vertex Technologies. He had a meeting scheduled with his engineering team to review the latest modifications to the quantum thermal regulation system. The same system he had sketched on a whiteboard 6 months ago, while investors stared in disbelief. The modifications had worked. Efficiency had improved by 42%, exceeding even his original projections. Manufacturing costs had dropped by 51%. The prototype was scheduled for final testing next week. But as Marcus walked toward the conference room, his phone buzzed with a message that stopped him in his tracks. It was from James Henderson, his former supervisor at Aerostar. Marcus, there's something you need to see. Foster is talking. He's made a deal with prosecutors. He's giving up names. And your name is on a list that I never knew existed. Marcus's blood went cold. He stepped into an empty office and called James immediately. What list? What are you talking about? Foster had contingency plans. Plans that went beyond blacklisting you. He identified you as a potential threat years before the prototype incident. There were discussions about more permanent solutions. Marcus's hand tightened on the phone. More permanent solutions. What does that mean? It means that Foster considered having you killed Marcus. The only reason it didn't happen was that one of his associates talked him out of it. Said it would attract too much attention. The room seemed to spin. Who talked him out of it? Richard Morrison. Marcus leaned against the wall, struggling to process what he was hearing. Richard Morrison. The man who had tried to have him removed from the car repair scene. The man who had filed the SEC complaint. The man who had attempted to destroy his credibility. That same man had once saved his life. Why would Morrison save me? Because Morrison was smarter than Foster. He knew that killing a black engineer would trigger investigations, media attention, potential exposure. It was easier to just destroy your career and let you disappear on your own. James's voice was heavy with disgust. They debated whether to murder you the same way they might debate a quarterly earnings report, like you were a line item to be managed. Marcus closed his eyes. Is this going to come out in the trial? It's already come out. Foster's testimony was leaked to the press an hour ago. By tonight, everyone will know. At 1:47 p.m., the news broke. Every major outlet carried the story. Gerald Foster had admitted under oath that he had considered ordering the murder of Marcus Thompson. The conspiracy had been stopped not by conscience, but by calculated risk assessment. The public reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Marcus's phone exploded with messages. Journalists, politicians, celebrities, ordinary people from around the world, all expressing shock, all expressing outrage, all expressing support. But Marcus felt none of it. He sat alone in his office, staring at the wall, remembering the nights he had spent sleeping in doorways. The nights he had wondered if anyone would notice if he simply didn't wake up. They had considered killing him, and no one would have known. No one would have investigated. He would have been another homeless man who died in the streets unmourned and quickly forgotten. A knock at his door. "Come in." David entered. His face was pale. "I just heard. Marcus, I don't know what to say." "There's nothing to say. It happened. Or rather, it almost happened." "How are you processing this?" Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm not yet. Maybe not ever." He looked up at David. "You know what the strangest part is? Richard Morrison saved my life. The same man who shoved me aside when I tried to help with your car. The same man who tried to destroy me with SEC complaints and rumors about mental illness. He saved you because killing you was too risky. That's not conscience. That's calculation." "I know, but he still saved me. And I don't know how to hold both of those truths at the same time." David sat down across from him. "Maybe you don't have to. Maybe some things are just complicated. Maybe people can do terrible things and still accidentally do something right." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Morrison is testifying tomorrow, as part of his plea deal. He's going to admit to his role in the blacklisting campaign." "I know. I want to be there, in the courtroom. I want to look him in the eye when he confesses." David nodded. "I'll arrange it." At 9:00 a.m. the next morning, Marcus sat in the gallery of the federal courthouse. The room was packed. Foster's trial had attracted national attention, and the revelation of the murder conspiracy had only intensified interest. Security was tight. Cameras were everywhere. Richard Morrison was called to the stand at 9:17 a.m. He looked diminished somehow. The silver-haired power broker who had commanded rooms with his presence now seemed small defeated. His eyes swept the gallery and stopped when they found Marcus. For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. Then the prosecutor began. "Mr. Morrison, please describe your relationship with Gerald Foster." "We were business partners. Tech Horizon invested in several of Foster's ventures. We shared certain interests." "Including an interest in eliminating threats to your businesses." Morrison's jaw tightened. "Including that?" "Yes." "And was Dr. Marcus Thompson considered such a threat?" "He was. His patents and expertise were valuable, but his integrity made him difficult to control. When the prototype failed at Aerostar, Foster saw an opportunity to remove him permanently." "And you participated in this removal?" "I participated in the blacklisting campaign. I made calls. I sent emails. I ensured that Dr. Thompson could not find employment in our industry." The prosecutor paused. "Mr. Morrison, the court has also heard testimony about discussions of more extreme measures. Discussions about having Dr. Thompson killed. What can you tell us about those discussions?" Morrison's face went gray. "Foster proposed it. He said Thompson was too smart, too persistent. He was worried that Thompson would eventually find evidence of the frame-up and go public." "And what was your response?" "I talked him out of it." "Why?" Morrison was silent for a moment. "Because it was too risky. Because it would attract attention. Because dead bodies create investigations, and investigations create problems. He paused. Not because it was wrong. I didn't argue against killing an innocent man because killing is wrong. I argued against it because it was impractical. His voice cracked. I've had a lot of time to think about that. About what it says about me. About the person I became. He looked directly at Marcus. Dr. Thompson, I know you're in this courtroom. I know you're listening. And I know that nothing I say can undo what was done to you. But I want you to know that I am sorry. Not just for what I did, but for who I was. For the kind of man who could discuss killing someone like discussing a business expense. Tears were streaming down Morrison's face. You were brilliant. You were innocent. And we tried to destroy you anyway. Because you were inconvenient. Because you threatened our profits. Because it was easier to break you than to admit our own failures. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I saved your life, but only because I was too much of a coward to be a murderer. That's not virtue. That's just a different kind of weakness. The courtroom was silent. Marcus sat motionless, his face unreadable. The prosecutor continued the examination, but Marcus barely heard the rest. He was thinking about the strange mathematics of survival. The razor-thin margins that separated the living from the dead, the visible from the invisible, the remembered from the forgotten. Morrison's cowardice had saved his life. Foster's arrogance had created the evidence that eventually exposed him. Amanda's guilt had provided the documentation that brought them both down. And Marcus's stubbornness, his refusal to stop being an engineer, even when he had nothing, had given him the skills to seize the moment when it finally came. It wasn't justice. Justice would mean that none of it had happened in the first place. That Marcus had never lost 3 years of his life. That 11 other victims had never suffered. That 2 people had not died by suicide because powerful men found them inconvenient. But it was something. It was accountability. It was exposure. It was the beginning of change. At 4:15 p.m., the court adjourned for the day. Marcus walked out of the courthouse into a swarm of cameras and microphones, but this time he didn't try to escape. He stopped at the top of the steps and turned to face them. You want to know how I feel? I feel tired. I feel angry. I feel grateful. I feel confused. He paused. Mostly I feel determined. Determined to do what? A reporter shouted. Determined to make sure that what happened to me never happens to anyone else. Determined to build systems that see people instead of filtering them out. Determined to create a world where brilliance is recognized regardless of circumstance. He looked out at the crowd. Gerald Foster will spend the rest of his life in prison. Richard Morrison will never work in this industry again. But punishing individuals doesn't fix systems. It doesn't change cultures. It doesn't prevent the next Foster from rising to power. His voice rose. That's what the Thompson Initiative is for. Not revenge, not vindication, transformation. Building something new instead of just tearing down what's broken. A reporter called out, "What would you say to people who are currently in the situation you were in? Homeless, overlooked, invisible." Marcus was quiet for a moment. I would say, don't give up. Don't stop being who you are just because the world can't see you. Your circumstances don't define your worth. Your address doesn't determine your intelligence. Your appearance doesn't reflect your soul. He took a breath. I would say survive, however you have to. Keep your mind sharp. Keep your dignity intact. And when your moment comes, be ready. He turned and walked down the steps. David was waiting with a car. Marcus climbed in, and they pulled away from the courthouse. Where to? David asked. Marcus checked his watch. 4:47 p.m. The shelter. I have a class to teach. David smiled. Some things never change. Some things shouldn't. At 5:32 p.m., Marcus walked into the West Side shelter. The common room had been transformed over the past 6 months. New tables, proper equipment, donated computers and electronics. The Thompson Initiative had provided funding for a permanent STEM education space. But some things remained the same. Destiny was waiting at the main table, her water quality tester in front of her, surrounded by a dozen other children who had joined the engineering class. "Mr. Marcus, you're late again. I was at the courthouse, watching some bad people face consequences. Did they go to jail? Some of them. Others will soon." Destiny nodded seriously. "Good. Bad people should face consequences." Marcus sat down at the table. "They should. But you know what's more important than punishing bad people? What? Building good things, creating, innovating, making the world better instead of just trying to make it less bad." He looked around at the faces watching him, children from backgrounds like his own, children who had been told in 1,000 subtle ways that they didn't matter. "That's what we do here. We build things. We learn things. We prove that brilliance exists everywhere if you're willing to look for it." Destiny held up her water quality tester. "Speaking of building things, I improved my design. Want to see?" Marcus smiled. "Show me." She pressed a button. The device lit up with a new interface displaying detailed readings instead of just a simple green or red light. "Now it shows exactly what's in the water, and I added Bluetooth so it can send the results to a phone." Marcus stared at the device. "Destiny, this is remarkable. You did this yourself?" "Mostly. I watched some YouTube videos, and I used the new computers you got us." She grinned. "Also, I might have stayed up past bedtime a few times." Marcus laughed, a genuine sound of joy that surprised even him. "This is exactly what the initiative is about. This right here. A 10-year-old girl creating technology that could help thousands of people using donated equipment and determination." He looked around at the other children. "You all have this inside you, every single one of you. The question isn't whether you're smart enough or capable enough. The question is whether the world is going to give you the chance to show it." He stood up. "I spent 3 years invisible. 3 years being told I didn't matter. But I never stopped being an engineer. I never stopped creating. I never stopped believing that my moment would come." His voice filled with emotion. "Your moment will come too. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But if you keep learning, keep building, keep refusing to let anyone tell you what you can't do, your moment will come." At 7:15 p.m., the class ended. Marcus walked out of the shelter into the cool evening air. The city lights were beginning to twinkle. Somewhere out there, millions of people were living their lives, most of them unaware of the forces that shaped their fates. His phone buzzed. A text from Patricia Chen. "Final prototype test completed. Success on all metrics. Congratulations, Dr. Thompson. You changed aerospace engineering. Again." Marcus smiled. Another text from David. "Amanda's donation officially processed. 300 million in the bank. Ready to change the world." Another from Sarah. "Board approved your systemic reform proposal unanimously. New hiring protocols take effect next month. We're rewriting the rules." Marcus put his phone away and looked up at the sky. 6 months ago, he had been sleeping under that sky, invisible and forgotten. Today he was standing under the same sky, but everything else had changed. No, not everything. He was still the same man, still the same engineer who loved solving problems, still the same teacher who found joy in watching children discover their potential, still the same stubborn soul who had refused to give up when every force in the world told him to. The circumstances had changed. The platform had changed. The resources had changed. But Marcus Thompson was still Marcus Thompson, and that he realized was the whole point. They couldn't destroy him because the thing that made him valuable was never external. It was never about the job or the address or the clothes. It was about what was inside his head, what was inside his heart, what no amount of conspiracy or cruelty could ever take away. He had walked through fire and emerged not just unbroken, but refined. And now, with every child he taught, every system he reformed, Every life he helped transform. He was paying forward the simple truth he had learned in 3 years of darkness. Your worth is not determined by how others see you. Your potential is not limited by your circumstances. Your brilliance belongs to you, and no one can ever take it away. Marcus Thompson looked up at the stars one last time. Then he turned and walked back into the shelter. There was still work to do. There would always be work to do. And he was ready.